Are we good?
Call to order of the Newport Beach Planning Commission, Thursday, June 9th, 2016. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
All commissioners present with the exception of Commissioner Brown and Commissioner Hilgren who are excused this evening.
Public comments. Public comments are invited on non-agenda items generally considered to be within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. Speakers must limit comments to 3 minutes. Before speaking, please state your name for the record and print your name on the blue forms provided at the podium.
Good evening, Chair and members. My name is Dennis Baker, and just a repeating of a request that the Planning Commission meetings be televised and archived by the city. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Okay, I don't see any other public comments. Requests for continuances?
Chair Kramer, there are no requests for continuances.
Yeah, just a point of clarification, Mr. Baker, on the June 23rd Planning Commission agenda is televising of the Planning Commission meetings. Consent items. Item number 1 is the minutes of April 7th, 2016. Any comments on the minutes? Commissioner Caddy?
There was a comment from the audience on that. There was a handout by Mr. Morgan. The motion should include his correct spelling.
Any
I
other?
make a motion for approval.
Second. Please vote.
Motion carries 3-2 with Commissioners Wygant and Lawler abstaining.
Next is public hearing items. Item number 2 is Avila's El Ranchito outdoor dining use permit. As chair, I'm going to ask that these items be items number 2, 3, and 4 be combined due to similarity, and staff has packaged it that way. So item number 2 is Avila's El Ranchito outdoor dining permit. Item number 3 is Bungalow outdoor dining and off-site parking use permit. Item number 4 is Rothschild outdoor dining use permit. Brenda?
Thank you, Chair. I'm Brenda Wisniewski. I'd be happy to compile the 3 applications and provide one presentation. And for the public's sake, they can also provide public comments when the hearing is open. So as it's mentioned, we have 3 applications before you for use permits to establish outdoor dining at Avila's El Ranchito, Bungalow, and Rothschilds. These businesses are located in Coronel Del Mar on Coast Highway in MacArthur. The locations are shown here. Avila's is at the corner of Carnation and Coast Highway. Bungalow is one business in from the corner next to Golden Spoon, also on Coast Highway, and Rothschilds is at the corner of Begonia and Coast Highway. The surrounding uses, we have commercial establishments across Coast Highway and residential businesses inland or actually oceanward of the businesses to the rear, and also commercial businesses along Coast Highway. The background on this location is that the city recently completed a beautification project which resulted in water sidewalks in this area and benches and landscaping. I have some photographs to show you those earlier. The similarities between the applications is that each restaurant does currently operate under use permits that have been reviewed for the restaurants. So the use permit before you this evening is for the outdoor dining. Each of the seating areas do front Coast Highway. which is beneficial in that we do look at the impacts of the neighborhood, and so the residential uses that are behind them won't be directly in line with the seating area. They also, each restaurant does operate currently late hours, meaning beyond 11 o'clock. So each will be subject to an operator's license if the planning commission does approve the use permits tonight. Also, the outdoor dining areas are located in the public right-of-way, so they are subject to an encroachment permit that will be before the city council at their next meeting, which is next Tuesday. And lastly, because the outdoor dining areas are operational changes to the restaurants, they do require an amendment to the use permits that are currently in place. So I mentioned that conditional use permit is required for each outdoor dining area, and in general that means we're looking at the compatibility of these outdoor dining areas to the neighborhood. So we're looking at the proximity to residential uses, the hours of operation, as well as the parking. So one thing to point out is for outdoor dining, the code actually provides an incentive. That means that for any outdoor dining area that is less than 25% of the interior net public area, no additional parking is needed. So in this case, both Rothschilds and Opelas does not require additional parking per the code. However, bungalows, since we already do have an outdoor dining area in the rear, they require 6 additional parking spaces. So I provided you a matrix as distributed to you, and also have it here summarizing each of the applications. The first being Avila's. As I mentioned, they have a use permit in place that was approved in 2010 that allows them to operate with a full liquor license, a limited live entertainment, which means kind of a 2-person type of entertainment. They are permitted to have off-site parking, and they are permitted to have a parking waiver. The restaurant is a little bit over 2,000 square feet in size and currently operates from 10 a.m. to midnight or 12:30 on the weekends. The proposal is shown in the 3 columns to the right. So the outdoor dining area will be 460 square feet and surrounded by a bronze wrought iron fence. I have a photograph for you a little bit later. And the hours are from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. The requests for the hours have fluctuated from each of the applications, so we are conditioning each one to close at 10 p.m. to comply with just general neighborhood compatibility. The remaining sidewalk width in this area will be between 6 to 8 feet in width. And pertaining to the sidewalk width, this has been reviewed by our Public Works Department, and they feel that the width is adequate. One other mention was made related to Avila's, and a late packet was distributed to you on the 6th. We have a revised resolution before you with some strikeouts. The applicant had requested to change their morning hours to open at 9 a.m. The resolution shows an opening hour of 9 a.m. However, after we added that change, we realized that we did not properly notify the public notice, so we cannot unfortunately make that change this evening. To do so, it requires us to renotice tonight's meeting for that change. So for the action we're going to be taking tonight is purely for the outdoor dining area. But for action to be taken, I would direct you to the resolution that was provided to you. Here's a photograph of Avila's. The blue tape is what shows the sitting area. And the applicant provided this recently showing a visualization of what it would look like, and the photograph in the left-hand corner is the type of fencing they're proposing. On to the bungalow. The bungalow also has existing use permits in place. The most recent amendment was done in 1984 with an outdoor dining permit issued in 1996. They also are permitted to have a full liquor license with valet service, and they also are approved for off-site parking. As I mentioned, they already have an outdoor dining area in the rear, and their hours also fluctuate, opening at 9 a.m. and closing at midnight, and the outdoor dining in the rear actually is permitted to go to 11 p.m. on weekends. But in this case, also, we are recommending that the outdoor area was proposed to be permitted to operate 11 a.m. to 10 p.m., 9 a.m. on the weekends. And also, they similarly have a 7-foot sidewalk remaining. The bungalow does require an off-site parking of 6 spaces. And I'll show you the image of that in just a minute, where that is located, and talk about that in more detail. But here's an image showing the location of the outdoor dining area. And the fencing, they're proposing to do something similar to what is shown next door on the stairs, which is a black wrought iron with some design. And then they have a little sketch to show what it looks like. So as I mentioned, they do require an off-site parking agreement, and that does require a use permit approval as well. And they actually have an approval, at least in place, and they have been utilizing an off-site parking lot located at Avocado and Coast Highway, shown in the top left. Then they are provide a lease, a signed lease that's in effect for 35 spaces. They have 8 spaces behind the business itself, and 7 spaces as are next door designated for their use. In addition to that, they, per previous use permit approvals, they do purchase 2 in-lieu parking spaces from the city annually. So collectively, they have over 52 parking spaces secured in the area, and based upon a demand of 38 parking spaces, they actually have an oversupply. We have conditioned the project to ensure that the off-site parking lot located at Avocado and Coast Highway is required to utilize that space for their employees and valet parking. So that is something that's emphasized based upon the availability of parking spaces. We really see that as a great resource. Under Rothschild's, they have a use permit in place that was approved in 2000, also have a full liquor license, and they have a tandem parking arrangement that allows them to do valet parking in the rear. Their current operations are 10 a.m. to 12:30 a.m., and their seating area is a little bit smaller, over 210 square feet. A portion of it would be an raised area, and their hours would be from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Here's just an area showing the sidewalk area, and they're proposing to have their seating area enclosed with a railing similar to what they have in their second story. So here's the matrix as a whole. You do have a hard copy before you if you want to look at more detail. And lastly, we have a list of the required changes or approvals here, and we are turning over to the Planning Commission for any questions.
Thank you. Any commission questions for staff? Commissioner Kennedy?
Yes, couple. ABC obviously has to approve this, alcohol beverage control.
That's correct.
And do they still need access directly from the patio fenced area to the building? Or can they go out gates, go around and back in like bungalow has to do? Has that been addressed?
I'm not sure the ABC requirements. Bill might be able to respond to that.
I'm not sure of the requirements either. That would be something that ABC would consider and condition.
Directly with each applicant?
I'm sorry?
Directly with each address?
Correct.
Correct. Lighting and heating, have they recommended if they do, they're going to be portable heaters brought out? Or?
There have been no requests for additional lighting, and heaters would not require any type of discretionary approval from the city unless the area was enclosed in some way.
And finally, I noticed on the bungalow, it even shows up where the blue tape is, the fence is going right over gas meter locations. Is that acceptable? Yeah, the bungalow, that's Rothschild.
Bungalow.
Right there, see it?
That, I don't know.
I assume an adjustment would have to be made. That's
Possibly. I'm not sure what type of meters those are.
they're gas, I don't know.
Okay.
All right, those are my questions.
Commissioner Waller?
It certainly seems like a great amenity to the community. A question from Leslie Daigle's email dated June 6th on Monday. Maybe Mr. Torres could comment on the zoning issue she brings up in public versus private space and how that works, just for my knowledge of the public's.
Absolutely, Commissioner Waller. I believe former council member Daigle's question had to do with one of the
business improvement district members owning a restaurant in the community and voting on a project, and then now applying for outdoor seating in front of his restaurant. And if that's what you're referring to, we don't see any conflict with any activity that's been done in terms of the CDM entryway project and the application here for today for outdoor dining.
So when the entryway project was being contemplated design, was there this pre-existing notion that these restaurants would have outdoor dining as part of the deal? Mr. Torres?
Absolutely, Chairman Kramer. I wasn't part of the original design of the CDM entryway project. I think this is something they anticipated that may occur, but I don't think this was an integral component of the project. I think if you're asking would the project have happened anyways, I think it would have.
Brenda, is that true?
To my understanding, correct.
Yeah. Commissioner Williams?
Yes, I noticed that the bungalow currently has a patio, and on the weekends, that patio is allowed to be open until 11.
That is correct.
Was there any noise study done with that current patio there? Because that would face more towards residential, the way that that is off of. What street is that off of?
That is off of Carnation.
And so that was a precedent set. Was there any discussion to the ones that are on the street for having weekends to be allowed to be open until 11 p.m. for these 3 restaurants instead of 10?
So the restaurant you're referring to, the outdoor seating area going to 11 p.m., we did not look at that currently for the noise levels. However, we've not received any complaints that have caused any exceedances. The reason why we're suggesting 10 p.m. for the street side is that it's consistent with how we've been treating outdoor dining in other situations. So we felt it was appropriate in this case. And the applicants seem to be accepting of that.
But the current one at Bungalow is 11.
That's correct, in the rear.
Commissioner Zach?
So just to be clear, all the seating's on public right away, correct?
A portion of the bungalow property actually is on private property, and I think that the area on Rothschild's that's currently a planter is on their property as well.
Okay, so there's none of these areas, well, they all require an encroachment permit, correct?
That's correct.
Because they're encroaching within public property?
Correct.
And so is the only consideration the owners are giving just the payment of the encroachment fee annually?
Is the only consideration?
In terms of a monetary consideration to do this, is it just the encroachment fee that they pay annually?
Right, they will be subject to an encroachment
And
fee.
what is that amount, just out of
I'm
curiosity?
not sure offhand. Maybe Attorney Brian, do you have an idea what the special permit is? Unfortunately, I don't have that information for you.
I noticed in the conditions, the last condition on Public Works, it refers to City Council Policy L-21. And I pulled that up. And so that prior to issuance of the encroachment permits or building permits, the applicant needs to get this waiver from the City Council. Is that just referring to the fact that currently between MacArthur and, let's see here,
I believe the waiver is related to the...
MacArthur and Marguerite, there was an outdoor seating allowed on the sidewalk. Is that what that waiver's for?
The waiver, the L21 requires a sidewalk width of 8 feet in areas of high pedestrian activity. And the fact that these are going less than that, a waiver is needed.
So getting back to this encroachment permit, is the fee an annual fee or is it a one-time fee?
It's an annual fee.
We do need to know how much that is, so if the staff could find that out, that'd be great. So, Mr. Torres, there's no lease agreement or any other sort of contractual agreement between any sort of government entity, whether it be the city or the improvement district and these restaurants regarding use or functionality for the space?
No, Chairman Kramer, in this particular instance, I think it is an encroachment agreement, and that's processed through the Public Works Department.
Yeah, Commissioner Zach.
So the other question I had, so I see the standard indemnity language that you put in the conditions. This is probably directed to Mr. Torres. Is there also indemnity language in the encroachment permit? And to indemnify the city for any, if there's a car accident along PCH and, something happens, God forbid, to the outdoor seating.
Commissioner Zach, absolutely. We have pretty strong indemnity language, and that goes in all of our discretionary approvals, including the encroachment agreement.
So it's in the condition, it's in this conditional use permit and the encroachment permit?
Yes.
Is the city requiring the applicants to increase their insurance to cover this outdoor dining?
That's a good question, Chairman Kramer. The insurance is handled by our risk management, and I just don't know if they're increasing or if they go with our standard. I think our standard is $2 million. I don't know if they go above that for this.
So if you could make note in the conditions of approval, assuming we approve that be evaluated, the risks are obviously increased. If it's $1 million, I think that's what it is. I would think that should be agreed. Okay. Any other items?
Police report?
Police report?
Anything to be concerned about?
What's the history of these restaurants in terms of interaction with?
All restaurants have a long history, obviously. They've got no problems. I looked at calls for service for each of them. While there are calls for service listed, none of them point to any kind of neglect or over-service. This has no concerns with their activity.
Okay, great. Commissioner Wyman?
So the annual cost would be interested to me to see what they'll be accruing, and this insurance policy, there's going to be an additional cost if we're asking them to also purchase insurance. I'd like the commissioners to think about, and the public and the applicant to think about extending those hours to 11 p.m. on the weekends to allow business to occur out there and make them a little bit extra money for the cost that they're accruing.
So focused. Okay, any other items? Okay. Let's move on to the applicant's presentation. We're open the public hearing. Let's start first with Avilos. Does the applicant from Avila have anything to state for the record?
No, sir.
Is this Mr. Avila himself?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
My name is Peter Crane, General Manager for Avila's El Ranchito and CDL.
Any questions of the applicant?
Yes, I do. You had an example. Is this the iron work that's going to be the railing
That is the custom work, yes,
all the way
sir.
around?
Yes, sir. Target.
Nice.
Okay, thank you. The representative from the bungalow.
Good afternoon, Jim Walker, partner and owner of the Bungalow Restaurant, and appreciate the Planning Commission considering this. What questions? I can address some questions on the fees. If my recollection is correct, we paid approximately $1,750, and that included the parking waiver permit as well as the encroachment permit. So I'm not sure how that broke down, but I believe that the encroachment permit was about $1,000 of that, so don't quote me on that, but I know the total check that we wrote was about $1,750 to cover both permits. The other question that I heard was kind of in reference to the ABC. The ABC will come down once we have permission from you and from the City Council to move ahead with this project. We will then put the perimeter fence in. And once that fence is in, the ABC will come down and do an inspection. They will not come down prior to that because there's nothing to inspect. And so what they want to inspect is to see that we actually have a perimeter, and they want to see the perimeter in place. And so once that's done, then they will give us an adjustment to our current license that we can't have that outside dining and serve alcohol there. And I think you had a question about the bungalow in regards to access. I don't want to bring the picture back, but we are actually going to the expense of creating a different opening from the center of our bar so we have access to the patio from inside the restaurant. We also have a gate in most of the restaurants by law, will have to have an access gate from the patio that is strictly primarily for fire purposes, but we are not choosing to use that asset gate as our way to get in and out to service our guests. It's strictly there from a requirement. But we will have access, and the other reason we're doing it from inside the restaurant, frankly, is from the handicap issue, so that people in wheelchairs can access the patio easier from inside than going around the outside. But that's pretty much all driven partly by the agency.
Thank you.
And then also, you're asking, and I appreciate your comment about staying open until 11. You know, I've been in business there for going on 18 years, and Corona Del Mar is not a late-night town, and I think that kind of speaks to our police record and to the fact that we don't consider ourselves, and I think I can speak for Avila's as well as Rothschild's, we're not a type of operation that encourages late-night cocktails and bars. We're just not that type, and so we're pretty much literally rolling up the streets and closing the restaurants down by 10 o'clock. If we happen to have a party that's there late, that's the exception. In terms of noise from the patio, someone was asking about that. I've operated the restaurant, again, for about 18 years. We've had the patio most of that time. We're very sensitive to our neighbors in the back. We do not allow any type of loud music. If people get loud on our patio, we are the first one to address that. And it's not just because of our neighbors, it's because that's not the environment that we wish to set in our restaurant. And so we're very sensitive to the noise and to the neighborhood. So we've had very few problems and no complaints from our neighbors. So we try and take care of that. And from our standpoint, and I know also from the other restaurants, but specifically the bungalow, two things. One, when I first bought the bungalow, which has been back in 1999, I became part of the bid, the original bid, and at that point it was called Vision 2000. So this has been a 16-year journey, and it's seen its ups and downs, and there's been many times when I felt this project was not going to be where we are today, and I'm very thankful that it is where it is. And all along, there was never a promise or a guarantee that there was going to be outside dining, but if you look at some of the original drawings have tables and umbrellas in front of the restaurant. So there was an implied possibility that this is the direction that it someday could go. I can tell you the response I've had since we've completed the sidewalk and the things that are going on, and there's people here tonight that will support that. There's a lot of enthusiasm, there's a lot of anticipation about having this outside dining, and I think that it's really going to create a great energy for that part of Corona Del Mar. I think it's going to be a very good entryway to Newport and to our city. So I look at it, and I think the community looks at it, that it's going to be a plus. And from our standpoint, we're going to take care of it. And we want to make sure we do a good job. And after waiting 16 years, I'm really happy that we're at this point. So if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Commissioner King.
Have you read the conditions of approval and agree?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I'm just offering additional flexibility for you on Friday and Saturday.
No, I appreciate it.
To 11, so
That's very nice.
I'm willing to continue it to allow you to have that.
No, we'll take it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Applicant for Rothschild's.
Maggie Pesciacola, the owner of Rothschild's. Let me answer any questions.
Anything you'd like to say?
It's been 16 long years. We're just happy to be here tonight.
What's your highest selling dish? Okay, any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now I will open up general public comments, and since we combined 3 agenda items, I'll raise the limit from 3 minutes to 5 minutes. So does anyone have any public comments? Please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Lila Creston. I've lived at 707 Begonia Avenue for almost 43 years. In July, I am happy to say I've been happy there for most of my life. And I appreciate your efforts to keep the place as quiet and as calm as possible for the residents. I've been before our city council many times asking for that. I want you to know that I think all of you should keep the present standards for operation in the evening. I'm referring to the license under which El Cholo Restaurant operates. They, during weeknights, respect their neighbors who must work, and I would like you to do that for our neighborhood as well. Their hours are 9 o'clock on weeknights and 10 o'clock on weekends. After that, anybody who has drunk a lot will be way too noisy. I've known Jim and his restaurant for many, many years. I enjoy going there. All of my grandchildren insist we go there. But I can't live with the noise that can happen at 11 o'clock. I'm asking you to consider that there is a precedent being set if you extend to 11 o'clock. Please keep the hours that El Cholo must keep, 9 o'clock on weekdays, 10 o'clock on weekends. Anybody who needs to drink after that can certainly go inside. None of the restaurants are that crowded at their bar. Thank you for listening to me. I represent myself and 4 of my neighbors.
Thank you.
My name is, Patricia Meckling. I happen to be a neighbor of Lila's. I live at 703 Begonia. I've been there for 30 years. And my hat's off to Jim at the bungalow because Jim has always tried to accommodate the neighbors. You guys need to know that. He really has. Only thing that we're asking, and the other neighbors unfortunately couldn't get here, is that you folks do consider the hours again. I am pro-business. I understand we need to make money. They're going to have to pay more money for their insurance, which they probably will. And also their encroachment and coming out. Obviously, we've been coming down at Arthur Boulevard and doing a car dive into the restaurants either. Make sure that that's safe. And we're just asking for the neighborhood because I'm 100 feet from Rothschild's. They too have always been accommodating, tried very much to accommodate the neighbors. We accommodate with them. We're excited about the outside dining. The only thing that we're asking for, maybe, if you would please consider the hours. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Judy Wagner, and I own 701 and a half Carnation. I am 2 doors down from the bungalow and diagonally across the street from El Ranchito. First, I'd like to point out that I don't believe any vote can be taken tonight. I don't believe that there was proper notice. I brought my notice for this hearing, and it is postmarked 9 days prior. It's postmarked May 31st. I received it Tuesday, which I know is irrelevant. However, I was out of town, so I had 2 days to look into this. I haven't had time to speak to my neighbors. I think that's a big point. This is a very important issue to the homeowners as well as the business people. My thoughts that I've been able to put together in 2 days. My first thought when I opened this was no. These outdoor dining proposals seek to add how many tables with 0 additional parking. The parking in our neighborhood is out of control. 25, 30 tables, no more parking. And how many parking spaces have already been waived for these businesses? It's an extraordinary amount. I've had only a few hours to spend researching this, but I can tell you El Ranchito alone has 30 waivers. They only have 18 spaces. You've already waived 30. You're going to give them 12 more tables with no additional parking. I don't care that code says they don't need any additional parking. You're not requiring them to do anything like the bungalow's doing, purchase additional parking. Why the special treatment for El Ranchito? El Ranchito already, they don't follow the previous conditions that have been required for their waivers. I believe it says they were supposed to purchase annual municipal passes for their employees to use the municipal lot. I've lived there 16 years. I have never seen, I'm sorry, the restaurant's probably only been there 8 years. I have never seen an El Ranchito employees use that lot But every single night, I see employees parking on 4th Street, on Carnation, and on Dahlia. And Begonia, I'm hearing from behind me. I don't happen to walk on Begonia, so I don't see that. I'd ask you as our stewards, how many permits has El Ranchito purchased? Surely that was investigated before you decided to waive spaces for them. Or to give them, I'm sorry, before you decided to give them 12 more tables. The bungalow has offered to add additional off-site parking. I can attest that this parking also is not being used by employees, as stated in the proposal. I didn't even know there was such a thing. The bungalow has been generally a good neighbor. They have long-term wait staff. I know some of the bungalow wait staff by name because they've been parking in front of my house for 16 years. They've become my friends. They wait on me when I have dinner. They're not parking 3 blocks away. Some of this needs to be enforced before we start rewarding them with more tables. Due to the short notice, I didn't have time to even review Rothschild's, and I'm not as familiar with them anyway. The parking and congestion in our neighborhood is thoroughly unacceptable. It has gotten probably 200% worse, I'd say, in the last 8 years. You as our representatives cannot approve 20 to 30 more tables, which translates to 20 to 30 more cars without any additional parking. Thank you. If anyone wants to see my notice.
Good evening, Commissioners. Steve Rosansky, President and CEO of the Newport Beach Chamber of Commerce. I'm here to support all 3 applications this evening. Certainly these businesses are long-term businesses in our community, well-established, reputable businesses. They're adding a whole new, as Jim pointed out, a whole new energy, I think, to the Corona del Mar area. As you well know, I served 9 years on the City Council. This issue has been kicking around for a very long time, and I'm very happy to see that we're finally have implemented the plan for the intersection there, as well as the outdoor dining. I think it was always contemplated that there'd be outdoor dining there, so I shouldn't come to any surprise to anybody. We've been talking about it for years. So I would urge you to vote yes on all 3 applications. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Kramer, members of the Planning Commission, my name is Jim Mosher. I represent nobody other than myself, but I did have some comments on this.
Maybe you should rethink that one.
The first thing I noticed about this, our planning division has a number of planners within it. Usually applications like this, for a fairly minor matter, would be assigned to a planner who would spend some time preparing the report. For reasons I don't understand, the planning division director seems to be personally preparing reports and shepherding them to you, and frankly, they seem to be rather sloppily and hastily prepared with a lot of the details left unknown, and you're making a decision without the usual benefit of a careful analysis that you would have had. That's my first comment. Second comment is to me, outdoor dining is fine. There is a difference, though, between outdoor dining and dining on a city sidewalk. And to me, the threshold question when I saw these 3 applications is why? Why do you want to dine curbside on Pacific Coast Highway? It doesn't seem like a very attractive option to me. Kind of like an application to dine on the runway at John Wayne Airport. I don't totally get the logic of what you're trying to do and why this is going to revitalize anything. And I think there was a plan that this was going to be more of a community space. Maybe those tables and umbrellas would be city umbrellas, city tables for other uses than this. And I think the applications are different from one another. The one I'm holding here is the one from Aviles. And this is a request to encroach onto a long existing sidewalk. It looks to me like a pretty major encroachment into it, and actually got the visualization with the nice little fence. And when I look carefully at it, the fence is not going out quite as far as this tape is. Tape seems to be really obstructing the view down the public sidewalk. It seems to be forcing people to walk over a manhole and so forth. It's really awkward. And If that had been grandfathered in, it'd be something you'd have to work around. I'm not sure why you would be adding that to a public pedestrian way. It doesn't look good or attractive to me. I actually have a question with respect to all three of these. If you did think outdoor dining was good, and you were to permit outdoor dining but without alcohol service, would you then not need these fences to permanently be blocking the public access to these at all hours of the day and night? And you could perhaps have temporary tables put out on the sidewalk and not need the fence if you did not have alcohol service. It certainly seems like an option to consider. And like one of the commissioners, I was a little puzzled by the request. Normally the Public Works Division or department can issue the encroachment permits administratively, but in this case there's a need for a waiver. I'm still a little vague as to what City Council policy for sidewalk dining is being waived in this case. And I'm also not sure, and you didn't get a clear answer, whether there actually is an annual fee. I think the fee that Mr. Walker paid might be a one-time fee for an encroachment permit. I do not know one way or another. But this is the application for Avalas. I think there's quite a major distinction between this and the one for the other two, because you, I, all the taxpayers in Newport Beach just invested about $500,000 in this new expansion and beautification, and we have not seen how it might work yet. I'm a little unclear how bicycle traffic is going to get around there now that we've modified the street, if somebody's going to walk through there. And those not familiar with the history of this, the original plan was for a much wider expansion of the sidewalk. It was going to take out not just the parking spaces, but an entire parking lane. And with that much wider area, the intrusion of the restaurants into it would have been much less, if that was even part of the plan, but I'm not sure it was. My suggestion would be you wait at least a year to see how that public space works, how the community wants to use it, before you permanently have it fenced off for these restaurants. And I think the conflict question that the Assistant City Attorney just passed on, I think it's really deeper than that, because I do think it improper, just as one of you on the Planning Commission would not be voting on something that affected your own property different than anybody else. Whether sidewalk dining was contemplated or not, this project certainly affects the bungalow different than it does the other businesses in the Business Improvement District. And I don't think somebody who's going to be impacted differently should have been promoting and voting on the issue as it came along. So those are pretty well. In addition, the bungalow has this very odd parking arrangement, which, because you're combining these all together, you didn't hear much about. But apparently some of the parking is 3 blocks away. I'm not quite sure how valet parking works that distance, but anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Kramer and Commissioners, my name is Dennis Baker, and I live behind the 3 restaurants, directly behind Farmers and Merchants. So slightly to my left is Rothschild, slightly to my right is the bungalow, and I overlook the parking lot. I've been there for 30 years. All 3 restaurants have not been a problem. The bungalow and Rothschild's have both been very good neighbors. Avala's, there's been an occasional issue when they first took over from, I think it was the Oyster before that, but they seem to have resolved those, and those have more to do with water quality and washing down their parking lot and so on. So I wanted to speak to a couple of the issues that have been brought up. The first one's pretty easy. Commissioner Wagon brought up the issue of the patio in the back. The patio in the back very, very seldom goes past 10 o'clock. The patio in the back gets raucous and noisy. They have birthday parties back there and various other celebrations, and the mayor had a fundraiser there and so on. So I live with that, and I will attest that the staff there do come out and they do quiet them down a little bit. I mean, you have people singing happy birthday, that goes over real fast, and I'm not really worried about that. But it's a whole different environment than the environment that would be in front of the building on the sidewalks. So I don't think that there's a fair comparison there. Regarding the 10 or 11 o'clock, Mr. Walker, they roll up at 10 o'clock. Those restaurants are pretty much shut down. The thing I would be concerned about as far as making it 11 o'clock is that the entitlements go with the property. So I have good neighbors now. They run their restaurants well. They're considerate of the neighbors. Mr. Walker, the Petricolas, they may decide they want to sell the restaurant. And I have no control over who buys it, and maybe the next person comes in as a jerk, and then I have to deal with it. So keep in mind, please, as nice as these people are, the entitlements do go with the property. The other thing is this, the whole thing about parking. Parking is my crazy area because I've lived there a long time, I've dealt with it, I've spoken to it, I've addressed it, I've tried to come up with solutions and anything else. This city has done an extremely horrible job, but I also understand it is not your purview to correct that. That falls under the council. You guys don't have any, as far as I know, you have no control over parking issues. You have to follow the law, and the law basically goes back to that 25%. The 25% was brought in because of when they did the smoking thing, and the restaurateurs said, we're going to lose all this business, we have to have outdoors, so we're going to get 25%. There's a whole history of that I'm not, and don't have time to go into now. So this is another grandfather issue. But I think it is a little ironic that Rothschilds and Avila, based on the law, do not have to have any parking, yet they have the least amount of parking of any of the restaurants. And that's by the law, by the code. And you have to abide by that. And that Walker at Rothschild, or at the bungalow, he's adding it, yet he has the most of all in the way of parking. What they really need, again, you can't control this, but what they really need is a comprehensive plan in that area for parking. The city has spent tens of thousands, or maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars on consultants and has not done anything to resolve the parking issue there. Again, it's not part of your purview. But I did want to bring that up because those questions have been brought up. Regarding why, Mr. Moser asked about why outside. So I asked Heidi from Rothschilds that very question. She'll remember just this afternoon. Her response to me was dogs. So when you think of it, it makes sense. And I think that's fine. I mean, people like to have their pets when they're out for a walk and maybe stop in. And if they're outside, they can have their pets with them while they're enjoying it. Maybe even put a bowl of water down for the dogs. That doesn't negatively impact me. I do not see that the restaurant and the dining specifically as far as noise or inconvenience to me or my neighbors behind me is going to be an issue. But I think there are much bigger issues than are being addressed right here. And again, they're maybe are beyond your control. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Bellamy Walker, and we live at 606 Carnation, a few houses down from the bungalow. And just wanted to address parking. Parking is a problem now, regardless of any additional tables set out, because of the people that come visit our community and go to the beach. They park right in front of our house, and parking is not going to be impacted more negatively if there's more people coming to these restaurants. It's already impacted. So that to me is a non-issue. And as residents, we would like to see outdoor seating, just to have an additional option to dine and spend money within our own neighborhood and have some diversity within our neighborhood. Yeah.
If I may, I just want to respond to a couple of things, if that is all right with the Planning Commission. Lila, I recognize the people behind me, and I'm appreciative of the fact that they have been long-term customers. And I understand their concern. And I also sit on the parking committee in Corona Del Mar. And as Dennis said, we have done several studies. And part of the problem is there's no easy solution. One of the things that the Rothschilds, the winery, and myself are discussing that I think would be helpful to their concerns is we're trying to consolidate our valet parking to make our parking more efficient within the restaurants, because what happens now is we're kind of divided over the lots, and sometimes the lots are empty because they belong to somebody else. And so what we have found and what we're trying to accomplish is to consolidate our valet parking into one valet, which will make that parking in that whole area much more efficient and bring more cars into the lots rather than onto the streets. In terms of employee parking, that is an issue. It's one of our great concerns, not only from our restaurants, but as I said on the parking committee, that's one of the things that we're trying to address for all of Corona Del Mar, is to have some control over where employees park. As a restaurant owner, I can't follow my employee every day to make sure they park in a designated area. We ask them to do that. We give them directions to park there. And if I know about it, if someone would tell me that they saw Marty or Linda or whoever might be parking on the street, I will address my employee. We don't encourage it, but I can't follow that as a restaurant owner every day when they come to work or when they leave. The other problem that we face, very frankly, is if, on two issues, if we're going to look at parking, I would suggest that somebody talk to the CDM Plaza where Gulfstream and Tommy Bahamas are, because they instruct their employees to park on our side of the street. And their employees are not allowed to park in that lot. So some of the employees that she's talking about aren't ours. They work for Tommy Bahamas, or they overflow from that lot, so we have an issue with that. The other thing is, in terms of the hours of operation, I appreciate 11 o'clock, but I think if we had to close at 9 o'clock, that would really be detrimental to the viability of the outside patio dining. And so I hope there's a compromise there somewhere, but I would also say if we're going to implement something of that nature, and we're going to be held to a 9 o'clock status, then I think we should address Gulfstream. I think we should address everybody else that has outside dining and hold them to that same standard. If we're going to have to close at 9, then I think it's only fair that everybody in the city that has outside dining also has to be part of that restriction. So I think the purpose here is to try and find a way that everybody can be as compatible, and there's always a rub when you have commercial backing up to residential. And there's never going to be a perfect solution to that. I know, and I know the other restaurants that are here are very sensitive to that, because the very people that complain about it are the people that are our customers. So of course we want to take care of them. And we're not looking to make a problem worse. I think, frankly, that in many ways this outside dining is a little bit overrated. I know I had some issues with the sidewalk dimensions because there's a feeling that we're going to be inundated with people. I think we're going to hopefully do a good business, but I think we're going to spread our customers around. I don't think that it's going to be herds of people. As a business owner, I would love that, of course, because that's going to help our revenues. But I think it's just going to add another dimension. Like Dennis mentioned, we're going to make it dog-friendly. I think that's going to bring a whole different attitude and type of people that have asked me to make our patio downstairs dog-friendly, which we've been reluctant to do. So I know there's a lot of people that would like to have that as an option. So please consider all of those things when you make your decision, because I think ultimately we will work out the issues and we will make this a really great venue for Corona Del Mar. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to close the public hearing. Right back to the commission. I closed the public hearing, ma'am. Thank you. Right back to the commission. Any discussion?
One question for staff on the 9-day notice, the one woman brought up. Is that an issue, or is that, just maybe elaborate a little bit on that?
We have a standard practice of mailing the notices out a particular day before the hearing. In this case, the notice was mailed on May 27th, which is 13 days prior to today's date. So the notice was adequately mailed in accordance with the requirements.
Okay, and then I just want to, there was so much talk on parking. This body, we enforce the code. We're not a policy-making body. The code says that outdoor areas do not require additional parking if it's less than, if it doesn't exceed 25%. So we don't have a purview over that. So I just wanted to, there was a lot of comments on just getting that on the public record on the parking issue, because there's a lot of chatter about that. That's it.
Chair Kramer and the commission, if you'd like to know the follow-up on the annual fee for outdoor dining over 100 square feet.
Ma'am, could you please sit down? You're causing a disruption.
She's lying.
You're out of order.
I don't care if I'm out of order. She's lying.
Very disrespectful.
Would you like to look at this?
Ma'am, please leave. Please be quiet, okay? Thank you.
So just to follow up, the annual fee for the outdoor dining for over 100 square feet is $258.
Outbursts like this are not acceptable. Okay? I don't care if you're upset. Okay? You have to be respectful of order. Thank you.
Can I address the question of the applicant that he brought up about the parking here at the Gulf Stream and that area? If they are truly instructing their employees to park in residential areas, how do we, as a city, go determine that? I mean, we have a pretty big parking lot here that probably could be used for them. It's a public parking lot, I would assume. I don't know if there's rules prohibiting that. But on the evenings, that parking lot is pretty vacant, so maybe there's something we can do with those owners and say, hey, don't do that, do this. I don't know, just...
I can't speak to, since we're right across the street from the parking lot, it's across the street here. Actually, the center, the corner has a bus that shuttles employees back and forth from the parking lot across the street from here.
So they're instructed as...
That's something they did on their own. And related to enforcement of parking in those situations, it really depends on if we have anything in a use permit such as this, to say you are required to park your employees here. Public parking is public parking, so we can't really control if the employees choose to park in the public area. But if we do have a condition requiring it, then it gives us a little bit more teeth. In the case of Corona Del Mar Plaza, they have taken upon themselves to offer their employees to park off-site, which is actually across the street, and provide a shuttle to bring their employees to their facility.
Commissioner Lawler?
If there's no more discussion, I'd like to make a motion.
Commissioner Kidd?
Never mind, I'll listen to your motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve item number 2, 3, and 4. That's Sevilla's Rancho Outdoor Dining Use Permit, PA 2016-080. Item number 3, Bungalow Outdoor Dining and Offsite Parking Use Permit, PA 2016-083. And item number 4, Rothschild Outdoor Dining Use Permit, PA 2016-088. I heard Commissioner Wigan's request for the 11. I'd like to, in my proposal, keep it at 10. I think it's a fair compromise from what I heard from the public. And I'd like to incorporate Commissioner or Chair Kramer's request that a condition be added that adequate insurance be added.
Mr. Chair, I'll second that motion.
If we can make some adjustments to your motion. For item number 2, we do need to amend the resolution to eliminate the request to open at 9 a.m. So that is for use permit UP 2016-019. Also, on item number 3, there was an error in the findings. Finding C3, indicating the hours of the outdoor dining area would be from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Were those amendments?
Yes.
Thank you. And also, there was a request for the commission to take each item separately.
Yes.
So you can make the motion and we'll vote on it separately.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Zach?
So do we have a motion on the floor right now, or is
There's a
there
motion
still-
second, but I haven't called for the vote yet. So
Okay.
I have something to say.
Well, just a couple things. One is, let's start with the easy one. On condition number 18 for Avila's and for Rothschild's, and it's condition number 19 for the bungalow. It's just, I think it's just say prior to issuance of building permits. It's just a minor thing. Just talks about the quantity of plumbing fixtures in the restrooms must justify the increase in capacity. So I'm just saying that should be done prior to issuance of building permits. And then, I think these are great restaurants in the community, and I'm pro-business. I want them to be successful and have additional revenue opportunities. I mean, the city gets a piece of, sales tax increment, so it's good for the city too. But if I just look at the fact that they're using city property to increase the revenue, and there's really, other than this encroachment fee, permit fee, it just seems pretty nominal. And I'm wondering why staff didn't maybe think that through a little bit more as to maybe there is some sort of a lease agreement to use the space to increase their commerce. If there is an opportunity for for each business owner to maintain all their sidewalk frontage in exchange for using the sidewalk space, to reduce maintenance costs for the city. I wanted to hear a little bit more of staff's thought process on that and why that wasn't taken into consideration.
The use of the right-of-way is within the purview of the city council. The use permit, which is what we're discussing tonight, is really related to the use and its impacts to the neighborhood, whether or not it's compatible. So whether or not the use is appropriately located within the right-of-way and the exchange for that right-of-way and for private purposes is really a policy decision that the council will be discussing when they consider the enforcement permit on Tuesday.
I think, I agree with Commissioner Zach. I think there needs to be some communication to council with respect to that particularly, some additional consideration that is appropriate given, the benefits that the applicants are receiving. Any other items? Okay. Call for a vote.
So this vote is for Avias El Ranchito. Motion carries unanimously 5-0. This vote is for the bungalow. Motion carries unanimously 5-0. This vote is for Rothschilds. Motion carries unanimously 5-0.
Thank you. Next item is item number 5, the residences at Newport Place. Staff. Staff, go ahead.
Chairman Kramer, members of the Planning Commission, I'm going to start off this presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Rosalind. The Residences at Newport Place is a redevelopment project up in our airport area. It's taking out what's known as the MacArthur Square Commercial Retail Center. It's actually a 5.7 acre project site. I apologize for the typographical error there. It's in the airport area. We'll be removing an approximately 60,000 square foot shopping center. Construction of a mixed-use project, 384 residential units. 100 of those units would be density bonus units. Within the project, there would remain a 5,677 square foot retail space, and 86 units would be affordable. Here is the project area, and so you can see at the top of the screen is campus and the airport. MacArthur is that central street right down the middle, at the corner of Dove, Scott, Corinthian, and Martingale. It's highlighted in red. This is a depiction of the general plan designations in that area. The salmon color that you see there is the MUH2, or mixed use horizontal 2 designation. What this area allows, pursuant to the general plan, is up to 2,200 residential units. The area is characterized by commercial, some light industrial uses, hotel uses, and some retail uses. The area is, of course, bounded by Jamboree campus and the 73 freeway. Within the general plan, it affords the replacement of existing commercial uses in the area on a traffic-neutral basis. In some limited circumstances, additional units on parking lots are also allowed, but not in this particular area. So the provision, the general plan allows for residential only when you take out existing commercial uses, again on a traffic-neutral basis. The general plan does require a 10-acre minimum of villages. It also talks about public parks, enhanced pedestrian access, and walkable streets. This is a figure within the general plan. This is a conceptual figure. It's figure LU23. And within this figure, I've pre-oriented the image there to kind of maintain the same north-south orientation as the other exhibits. But you can see the green areas here are these parks that are conceptual in nature. It also shows a series of residential streets and pedestrian ways. The project site is located right here, as shown. Again, it's almost 6 acres in size. The conceptual sketch does have a park area and a pedestrian way. This particular graphic is the map from Newport Place Planned Community, and the project site is highlighted in that area. It is currently designated general commercial. In the area, we have a hotel directly to the north of Radisson, shopping center, car wash, and restaurant to the northwest, offices generally to the south, and we have restaurants and a bank toward the east. Now, the area that's shaded on this diagram is a residential overlay that was added approximately 2 years ago. What this overlay does is it allows for less than 10-acre minimum site requirement, provided that the project includes 30% of the units for affordable housing. There is no commercial requirement that's there, and now the overlay was created due to housing element policies to get our housing element certified by the state of California. I want to go ahead and turn it over to Rosalind right now just to go through the basic project details. And let Rosalind go ahead.
The Newport Place project consists of 4 separate buildings to be built above a parking garage. As you can see on the site plan here, we have a total of 4 residential towers are to be 4-story in height, to be built above a 2-level parking structure of approximately 715 parking spaces. The towers are approximately 58 feet in height with architectural elements up to 83 feet to house the elevator, shafts, stairways, and mechanical equipment. It has private amenities, mostly centrally located within this area. As you can see, a large swimming pool with recreation activities and separate interconnecting courtyards that's kind of wrap around the overall and then connecting all the buildings together. The project also includes a half-acre linear open space area, which is located at the southerly portion of the project here at this location. And the applicants request an option to reduce this area to 1/3 of an acre. In terms of the unit mix, the proposed unit mix consists of 54 studio units, 173 one-bedroom units, 136 two-bedroom units, and 21 three-bedroom units. Of of those, 298 parking rates units are proposed, with 86 affordable units, which make up of 30% of the base units. The applicant consists of the following land use requirements requests. The plan development permit is being processed here in lieu of the site development review application. This process would allow the deviations in terms of development standard. This one would allow the building height increase from the required 55 feet to 58. However, the applicant is not proposing minor adjustment to bring that building height down to 55 feet and 6 inches. And so does the architectural elements, reduced from 83 to 79 feet in height. The adjustment also include the building setback reduction from the required 30 feet to 18 feet, which is the shortest distance from Corinthian Way, 20 feet from Martingale Way, 22 feet from Dove Street, and 25 feet from Scott Drive. The application also concludes a general plan policy waiver. The general plan policy waivers is being proposed here for 1 hectare parkland dedication allowed for the adjustment. The waiver also requests the waiver requested because the site does not meet the neighborhood parking definition. The applicant is proposed in lieu of the dedication. It's an in lieu payment equal to the land value of 1 acre of parkland. In turn, the project provides approximately half an acre passive of open space as illustrated on the site plan. And it's also have a public access through an easement which is available for the general public during daylight hours. The application also includes a lot merger to consolidate the existing 3 continuous parcels, and the consolidation is to accommodate the project. Affordable housing implementations plan is also being proposed. This is in the requirement of the density bonus provision. It also describes the project obligation to provide affordable housing, which equate to 86 units for low and very low income household. The rent will be restricted for a minimum 30 years, and units will be dispersed throughout the project. In terms of the environmental review, an initial study of mitigated negative declaration has been prepared pursuant to the CEQA guidelines. It will circulate for public comments for a total of 41 days from January 22nd through March 4th of this year. Staff received a total of 8 comments letters. And in turn, written response to comments in the errata has been prepared, along with the mitigation monitoring reporting program prepared. These are included in the May 5th Planning Commission package for the Commission to consider. The project's also being presented to the Planning Commission and the general public March 3rd of this year as a study session. During the meeting, the Planning Commission provide comments for the applicant to consider. They as follow: the requirement for a development agreement, the adequacy of the open space and private amenities provision, the necessity of the building setback reduction and building height increase, adequacy of the architectural style and project integration, and lastly, the traffic trip generation and the parking analysis and how that can impact the surrounding adjacent uses. Since then, the applicant has revised the site plan and mainly revised the landscaping plan. As you can see, the outline in blue in this area is basically the area of the open space, the linear open space. The easement boundary for the public access, as shown here, is outlined in red, As you can see, we mainly follow the pathway and some of the open space areas that's also been prepared. And this area will be gated at either end of that public sidewalk. In addition to the correspondence included in the May 5th package and the supplemental memo that staff distribute to the Planning Commission and general public to consider, we have received over 30 emails and 3 written correspondences. They're mostly in support of existing deli restaurant use and not in favor of the affordable housing. We also received written comments on the draft M&D. Staff has since then provided written response to that. The written comments also raised issues with regard to the lack of development agreement and concerns about the park dedication and waiver and the proposed building height and setback. We also received comment with regard to the need for an adoption of a specific plan or a comprehensive plan for the airport area before taking any action for the project tonight. At the conclusion, staff recommends that the project will be approved by the Planning Commission, conduct a public hearing, approve the project with findings included in the draft resolution, or deny the project if findings could not be made tonight. In the consideration for the denied project, staff requesting that the Planning Commission identify the findings with the reason for denial and continue the item to the next hearing for staff to prepare written resolution. And that's conclude my staff presentation. I also would like to mention that we have the environmental consultant and the traffic consultant that are here to answer your questions. And also, since then, I also received additional correspondences, 5 emails not in favor of the project, 1 commenting overall the project, and 1 petition with signature of the business owners and representative in favor of the project. And that's conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks. Any commission questions for the staff? Commissioner Kennedy.
Staff, could you put back the graphic on the master plan for that part of the community? One of the early graphics. Not that one. There you go. Can you tell us when this was established and adopted by the City Council?
Certainly, Commissioners. This figure is actually in the general plan. It was created in 2005, 2006, and it was adopted by the City Council in 2006. I wanted to kind of stress this in my initial part of the presentation because the project site, as depicted here, the actual site plan and the overall density of the project is in keeping with this concept plan.
So the areas in beige for the audience, if you haven't studied the general plan, are designed for future residential in this area.
That's correct.
The hopes of it. In the green areas?
Yeah, the light green areas were conceptual areas where parks might be provided, public parks. The orange linear items or streets would be new public streets to provide access to these new neighborhoods. And then the dotted kind of green line that you might see there connecting certain parks and areas that are what we call the pedestrian way, where we can increase pedestrian connectivity through the area. And one of the features of this project is that that linear park area, that half-an-acre park area, and the pedestrian way do line up with the site plan proposed.
But those green belt areas were just graphically represented.
Exactly, they were graphically represented, and so it's a concept sketch. So if an applicant came in and wanted to reposition it or put it in a different way or implement the general plan policies in a unique or different way, we obviously could consider that. So this isn't really a regulatory document, but it's really a concept of what we thought might occur, and the applicant has, in essence, brought that concept to reality with this site plan.
So the concept of housing coming into the airport area is not new?
Definitely not new.
Okay. Moving down, another question. You had 2014 said there was an additional overlay on this particular site. On one of the graphics I wrote a note.
Yeah, this is the graphic from the Newport Place Plan Community Text, which is really the zoning of this entire area that you see. The shaded areas are the residential overlay, and they match up with the general plan designation of MUH2. And so what we did with this overlay is to be honest, it was required by HCD as a policy to get our housing element certified. What they wanted was to have a path forward to allow for residential properties to come forward, and we needed to have the zoning in place, and so we added the residential overlay to allow residential in this area to get the housing element certified, and that was put into place, I believe, about 2 years ago.
Okay, then following up on that, the affordable housing requirement.
Yes.
The state is asking, demanding, nudging the city to provide that in various residential developments, correct?
I think as a general principle, yes. This is really the only area in town where we have an inclusionary requirement, absent the provision or the inclusion of affordable housing in up to 30% here. You couldn't do residential at all in this particular area without doing an amendment to the plan community text in some way to allow it to be exclusively for market rate housing.
And for doing that, there's a formula to create bonus density. In other words, additional units.
Yes. And the applicant is seeking density bonus in this case. The applicant is asking for what the state would allow is a full 35% of the bonus density. So the way that the density calculation works is that they get up to 50 dwelling units per acre, and they're asking for that maximum density. And then on top of that, they can ask for an additional 35% rounded up, and that's where you get the 100 additional units for density bonus. So the applicant is requesting full advantage of what state law and our municipal code provide for density.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wallen.
I remember during this study session, at least myself and maybe another commissioner or two were discussing the merits of a development agreement and whether that was required or not. When I looked through the documents, infill development does require a development agreement. So, and I read the shop-off letter and some others. Maybe you can help us understand why the staff doesn't, given the scope and magnitude of this project and the number of units and the apparent pretty clear public benefit of a development agreement, why the staff is recommending one. Because when you read this quickly, particularly if you're not well versed in zoning code, it seems to me this is infill development, and why is it not? That's my question.
Yeah, it's a great question, Commissioner Waller, and that definitely was a point of emphasis at the last Planning Commission meeting when this item was heard. Staff has looked at the item, looked at the general plan requirements and the municipal code requirements, and determined that this particular development does not actually require a development agreement in their assessment. And the reason why is that it's not necessarily infill, it's replacement units. And maybe Jim or Brendan can speak to that aspect of it better than I can, but it has to come down to one of the land use maps and the way this area is zoned and shaded, that the units being constructed here are not actually infill that would require the development agreement. They're something else, they're another entity. And so in this particular instance, we did reach out at the urging the Planning Commission to ask the applicant if they would voluntarily enter into a development agreement, and the applicant declined.
And so two follow-up questions, just because I'm not sure I understand and make sure the public does. What is the difference between infill and replacement units? Because clearly what's being built isn't replacing what exists. And two, why would the staff not want a development agreement? I know it's not required, but given the precedent of, we're not a policy-making body, I get it, but given the precedent that it could set, maybe a little more. I know it's not, maybe it's not required, maybe it is, but why wouldn't we want one, and maybe get into the infill versus replacement? Because I'm not sure I understand.
And that's a great question. Let me answer the second question. I'll refer to the planners for the first question as to staff wanting a development agreement. I don't think it's a question of whether we want a development agreement or not. I think we agree with you, though, that a development agreement would be beneficial to the city as well as the developer in this instance. And if staff had their brothers, we would probably prefer a development agreement. However, looking at the general plan, looking at the municipal code, in this particular instance, it's just not required. So the best we could do is ask the developer if they would like to enter voluntarily into a development agreement with the city, which is what staff has done, and the developer has declined it.
Yeah, but Mr. Torres, it's not the role of the staff to make that decision.
It's not, absolutely not.
That's the role of the city council.
And that's what they've done.
Was there any, a city council, rendered any decision on this development agreement issue?
So the general plan and the municipal code development agreement provisions have been reviewed and approved by the city council. And in this particular instance, at least according to staff's interpretation of those provisions, the development agreement is not required. So you're absolutely right, Chairman Kramer, that is the role of the city council. They've looked at this, not this particular project, but what a development agreement in general is required through the general plan and through municipal code. And the development agreement is not required in staff's assessment for this particular development.
Has the staff made any attempt to canvass council and whether they agree with staff's interpretation of the code?
Not that I'm aware of, Chairman.
So it really is an open question then?
It's a staff interpretation of the municipal code and the general plan that a development agreement is not required at this time with this development project.
Right, so you just answered what I asked.
Before we go to the next question, because I think it's important, because this is the code, the difference between infill and replacement, what specifically does that mean? Because when I read it, I don't understand it. So I think that would be helpful, at least for me.
And as a follow-up to Mr. Lawler, explain why and how commercial converts to residential on the replacement formula.
Certainly, I'll tackle the infill issue first. In a general sense, the word infill, this project could be viewed as an infill project in how that term is typically used in the planning profession. But when you look at the general plan policies, we have policies here. One, land use element 6.15.12, which does state that a development agreement is required for infill projects. But when you look at the other policies of the general plan, specifically land use LE 6.15.5, it talks about what an infill project is, and it uses terms that relate to infill projects on parking lots, and it specifies an area in the general plan called the Integrated Conceptual Development Plan area, which is really on the east side of MacArthur Boulevard, between MacArthur and Jamboree. And so in essence, that area is required to have a development agreement, but the other areas are not. And so again, we're looking at two different policies as well as the implementation program of the general plan. And when you look at these policies in concert, we came to the realization that the general plan didn't require it. And then when you look at the municipal code, which is a separate provision, it also doesn't require it because the project doesn't require any kind of legislative approvals. If it did, then there would be a development agreement requirement. And so when we looked at all of these in concert, we came to the conclusion that it's not required. Again, not without getting into the individual language of each section, that's my general response for that one. To the other question, which is how are the units converted, Tony, you have to help me out here with the date here, but it was probably 2007 or 2008 when the city traffic engineer created ratios where square footage could be converted to residential units, how much square footage to residential units. And that was reviewed and approved by the city and the traffic engineer. And the purpose of that ratio was to establish how much traffic are we going to be predicting from office and industrial and commercial uses, and then looking at, well, what that would translate to for housing, so that we try to keep this trip neutral, and that's what the general plan actually requires. So that when you take down a certain amount of resident or commercial, you can add back residential, and then the traffic would be basically the same. And so those ratios were established, again, probably in 2007, 2008, and we applied those ratios in this case, and that helps us to arrive at the maximum density that they're asking for based on the amount of commercial space that we're moving. And so in that respects, we don't have an increased traffic that's coming to and from the site as evidenced in the MND, and the traffic engineer can go through the trip generation if you want to. Again, we're actually going to have a reduction in trips. So with the application of those ratios that were previously established and through this project, we've ensured in consistency with the general plan policies that talk about this to be trip neutral.
So, I mean, the other major project that we've reviewed in the airport area in the recent past was Uptown Newport. So that's the one that's fresh in my mind. So on that application was also an infill project. So what's the distinction between that project and this project with respect to the issues that Commissioner Lawler has brought forward?
I think the principal difference there is the location. That project was in what's called the Integrated Conceptual Development Plan, which is actually shown on this diagram here. The area, there's a dotted line that goes around Cole Center, Newport, and that is the Integrated Conceptual Development Plan area. And so when you look at General Plan Policy 615.5, that's where they talk about infill on surface parking lots, and the development agreement is referenced as infill in the other policy, 615.12. And I think when you look at the principal difference is the geography, and the requirement is clearly tied to the Integrated Conceptual Development Plan as a mandatory requirement. So when you step outside of that area, it may be viewed as an open-ended question to some, and in our opinion, we don't believe that a development agreement is required based upon our review of the policies.
Yeah, Commissioner Lawler.
Not related to development agreement, just a question before, because I know a lot of the public's going to speak. I also remember in the study session, there was a lot of discussion about the retail, and there was, or the lack thereof, and there was a lot of discussion, certainly in the comment letters, about a lot of passion for some of the existing retail. Did the applicant make any efforts since our study session to incorporate any more retail in the ground floor? Because I certainly remember some of us discussing that. So did that come up at all just prior to the applicant present?
Yeah, the issue was discussed, but the applicant has made no changes to the project at this point in time. They may have a different response today depending upon the Commission's input. From day one, we've always thought additional retail in this project would be a good thing. The applicant is looking to maximize the density, and so they're looking to provide enough residential, commercial in their project site to call it a mixed-use project, provide a destination in that corner for the public and the residents. But the applicant has made no changes so far to increase residential, or I'm sorry, retail.
Okay.
Commissioner Zach?
In regards to the development agreement issue, I just want to make sure I understand so in the staff report, and maybe I'm just not following it properly, but in the staff report it talks about the 550 units that are classified as additive units, and those would be designated as infill units, and projects with those would require a development agreement. And then you were referencing the area within the boundary of conceptual plan, where there's a conceptual plan required. You're saying that's really where the focus of infill is, because where you said you're redeveloping these parking lots and stuff, and that was what the intent of the policy is. Am I mixing something here when I'm talking about the additive units triggering the development agreement rather than just a location? Or are there two elements here?
Yeah, I think there are two elements here. The additive units are only allowed in the Integrated Conceptual Development Plan as infill on surface parking lots, which means that they don't have to replace existing office development that's in that area. So that is a little bit different. Anywhere outside of that area or any other units beyond the 550, you actually have to take existing commercial or office or industrial uses down in order to do what we call replacement units.
So this is getting pretty technical here, but what I want to make sure I understand that when you are calculating the replacement units, it's based on trip generation, right? The ratio of commercial that's replaced with the housing. And so you are coming up with, they're allowed to have 284 replacement units that's commensurate with the existing commercial.
That's correct.
Correct? And did you use the 58,277 square feet, or what the development limit was for the site? Because there was an anomaly here where they exceeded development limit to come up with the 284 units.
We used the existing development of 58,000, I don't know the number off the top of my head.
277?
277. The difference between what they're providing and what they're
Got it.
taking down, so we use
Okay.
that.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood that, and I'm assuming there's a rationale why you would use that, because that's what exists, even though the limit is 56,880. But my next question is, the units, the 100 units that they're getting the density bonus on, 86 of which are in theory affordable units, so those aren't considered additive units. So all the trips that they get that are being generated by those additional 100 units, those aren't calculated as part, those aren't considered additive units because they're providing affordable housing and getting that density bonus provision?
Yes, per state law, basically, a developer can ask for what's called a density bonus, which are above and beyond.
Absolutely,
what the
yeah.
plan would allow, and so.
But those trips don't generate or trigger additive units, at least for the net difference between the 100 and the 86 affordable that they're getting, units that they're providing on site?
Well, the units themselves are going to generate traffic, yes, so
I know, but your formula for replacement units versus additive units is all based on how many units they're providing versus how much commercial is there. Now they're adding 100 more units. So that's where I'm really getting tripped up on all this, and why that's not considered additive units and therefore would require a development agreement. So I'm struggling with that, but maybe that's just the way that you guys see the policy fitting. The real problem here for me is this, is that the applicant started this process 2 years ago, and they were given direction that they didn't need a development agreement, and now here we are 2 years later and they spent a bunch of money, and we're talking about this now and it has a major impact on the project. So I'll have more comments later.
Commissioner White? Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's continuing problematic issues that, with this application, and in particular, I think with this development agreement issue. Yeah, Commissioner Kennedy.
Yes, on a different item, open space, can you take us through slowly the whole concept? Because this half-acre park almost doesn't do anything. It's there, it's like a, urban midtown Manhattan park instead of someplace you can kick a ball and stuff. Is it really necessary? Could they pay more fees, use that land more effectively to soften setbacks, etc., as opposed to that strip of land? And they didn't dedicate it, they want to make it easier. Walk us through that, please. Because they're paying $1,125,000 as a fee for that half acre or an additional half acre?
The general plan requires basically half an acre to be dedicated for public park purposes.
Only half?
Only half an acre, in this case. And we have the concept sketch of the general plan, and so the applicant looked to provide that space here in the diagram above, which is basically 1/2 of an acre. They also saw the pedestrian access as being a goal of the general plan, and so I think the applicant is trying to come close to adhering to that policy while still asking for a waiver, and the general plan policy does actually contemplate that specifically. And I think the rationale is that this half an acre space doesn't really meet the definition of a neighborhood park that's within our own planning documents. And so I think what they're trying to do is to balance that by, well, we'll provide the open space, we'll provide the access, we're trying their best to adhere to the general plan policy, and then they're offering the value of that half an acre that they're not dedicating, although they're providing the open space, as further mitigation for the requested waiver.
So on page 13, handwritten 13, in the middle of the page, staff refers to this as half-acre open space is too small to accommodate desirable amenities that would qualify as neighborhood park. So it's basically a walkway with, additional improvements.
Yeah, the space is largely passive. It'd be an area maybe for dogs to utilize and people to rest and recreate, but it is predominantly passive. And you're right, a half an acre, I suppose if it wasn't so linear, there might be a place to put a tot lot, and maybe there's space to even do that as well. But again, it doesn't really meet the definition of a neighborhood park that we might like to see, and it might be larger than that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, to build on to that, the pedestrian walkway that goes across Martingale that you had on figure LU23, does that require Martingale to block off parking spaces reserved for that open space / park? Because that street's pretty littered with parking from other neighboring.
Yeah, Martingale is pretty well impacted with street parking, but the walkway would end at the public sidewalk there, and we don't think it's ready to change it, but we could look at that if it was necessary. But we don't anticipate it now.
The makeup of that in the future versus what it is today.
So can you explain to me a little bit more? I think I understand, but if there's not a waiver of dedication for the park, the applicant would have to be required to submit a lot line adjustment, right? And the project would be redesigned and therefore reduce the number of units, is that right or not?
Maybe not a lot line adjustment, but the density is calculated based upon the net acreage of the site. And so if the half an acre is dedicated, and therefore then is not included in the density calculation, that would have would reduce the density of the overall project.
And what would that be?
I think the numbers are in the staff report. I think it's a net reduction of 33 units. So by dedicating the park and reducing the net acreage, you have the effect of reducing the overall density of 33 units.
And likewise, I mean, if the commission couldn't make the findings for waiver of the setbacks and height, I mean, it's the same thing, that the applicant would have to redesign the project, right?
That's correct.
Commissioner Zach?
Just to add on to the questions about the park, so why, I get it. I mean, I get why they're retaining ownership of the park so that they could increase their density, and I understand it. And then they're paying an in-lieu fee on top of that. But why are they limiting the public access easement primarily to just the sidewalk and not the entire area?
I think that might be a good question to put to the applicant. I think they're concerned about security and maintenance, I would assume, but they can address that question.
Okay. Do you see, the question for staff, I mean, do you see a difference in units that front that park versus units that front other sides of the project? I mean, in terms of security, you got sidewalks all around on major streets. From a security standpoint, I'm not quite sure I totally follow that logic. Does staff?
There are units that would kind of front the park. We think that's an amenity, and they can be secured with fences and gates, just as they would be otherwise at other sites. But I think maybe the applicant can address that. I know that was a concern that they expressed to us, and it may not be to those units, but the overall security of the space.
Okay.
And getting back to one of the other remaining items is the traffic analysis. So perhaps you could remind us again why there wasn't what the planning commission thought would be reasonable in this case, given the size of the project, to do additional traffic analysis. Why was that not done?
Well, we touched on this, I think, in the study session. Essentially, when the credits are given for the existing on-site land uses, and then you look at the proposed project, there's actually, for the TPO, there's a reduction in average daily trips of approximately 1,000 daily trips. And then even for the CEQA analysis, there is an increase in 200 approximately daily trips, but in each case, they don't hit the threshold for doing a detailed traffic study, and that in essence was the conclusion.
given the sensitivity of these projects, why wouldn't you decide on air of caution and do the analysis anyway?
Well, essentially, again, the TPO doesn't require the study, and so we don't have to do a traffic study in this case. In some instances with this project, the peak hour trips were less. In some instances, the AM peak hour trips were greater, but there's nothing in this area that would indicate that we would see with a detailed traffic study an impacted intersection, for example. Many of the intersections in the airport area are not close to failure, so I wouldn't see, even if we did a detailed study, I wouldn't expect an impacted result.
Any other questions for staff? Okay. Let's open the public hearing. Does the applicant have a presentation?
Chairman Kramer, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Brittany Jensen. I'm the Development Manager for Newport Place Residential, and it's my pleasure to be here before you tonight to once again present the residents of the Newport Place project. Here with me, I have present our architect, our civil engineer, our landscape architect, and as well the property owner. To briefly reiterate some of the main points of the project that Rosalind has already presented, the project site is 5.7 acres, currently occupied by the MacArthur Square Shopping Center site. It's a mixed-use proposed development with 4 levels of apartments over a level and a half of subterranean parking, approximately 715 parking spaces, and 5,677 square feet of ground floor retail space. 384 apartment units, including 86 affordable units, will be incorporated into the project. The total unit mix breaks down as 54 studio units, 173 one-bedroom, 136 two-bedroom, and 21 three-bedroom units. The overall building footprint, the landscape or open space percentage, I think is very remarkable in this project. We're providing 55% landscaping or open space to only 45% building footprint. As you can see in the site plan, this generally isn't the case. You can also see that the building has been broken up into 4 distinct buildings that provide open pathways running north-south and east-west. We also provide plenty of open space not only on the podium, but within the ground floor as well. On the ground floor, there's access to the retail component at the corner of Dove and Scott. There's also access to the ground floor residential units and garage, and the access to the open space that's being proposed. Below the ground floor is the second level of subterranean parking, which includes residential only parking and storage spaces for the residential use. At this point, I'd like to switch gears and discuss some of the comments and concerns that were raised in the previously held study session. One of the big comments or topics of conversation was the development agreement. I think it's important to point out the distinction in this project, especially when discussed in relation to previously approved projects. With respect to Newport Place, pursuant to General Plan Section Land Use 61512, we are not utilizing additive units per the definition of the general plan. Pursuant to Municipal Code Section 154520A2, we're not requesting or needing a general plan amendment, a zoning code amendment, or a legislative action. Other items that could trigger a development agreement discussion would include the recordation of a subdivision map or the request of vested entitlement rights, which we are not pursuing or requesting due to the short construction timeframe and completion of the project that's anticipated. One of the other comments made during the study session was in reference to the overall project architecture. With this project, we are not subject to any architectural design guidelines or architectural design review process, but we did feel it was important to address any architectural concerns that were raised. Quickly going over the overall architecture of the project, which has been modified from the study session, starting at the corner of Dove Street, moving along to the frontage on Scott, continuing to the corner of Scott and Corinthian, along to the corner of Corinthian and Martingale, the frontage along Martingale Way, which includes a residential-only garage entrance, and finally the end of the project at the Martingale Way cul-de-sac and the entry to the open space. We think that the most important thing to point out regarding the architecture is the fact that we are going to be incorporating high-quality colors and materials. I would ask one of my team members at this point to pass around the colors and materials board so that you, as the commissioners, can take a look at the types of colors and materials being incorporated within the project. The quality materials that we're including include stone veneer not only on the first floor of the project at streetscape, but also continuing up the building in certain areas. The inclusion of fabric awnings, metal railings, window treatments and storefronts, planters, pavers, and the choice of planting material. The quality has been achieved not only in the materials themselves, but in how the material will be executed that represent the attention and articulation to high quality. Some of the inclusions within the podium area of the project, including an area of enhanced paving, enhanced landscaping. This is up on the podium, the entry to the pool, the central pool courtyard from Martingale Way. Here you can see the pool terrace, including the double volume ceiling height clubhouse and cabanas. We also are including 2 spas. Again, here, this is a close-up version of the double volume ceiling clubhouse. We're also including something very unique to this project that we're very excited about, which is an open-air rooftop terrace on the top floor at the corner of Scott and Dove. This will allow residents an area to lounge, an area to barbecue, and an area to enjoy watching the planes land and take off from John Wayne. Here you can see another view of that open-air courtyard. It overlooks the central pool terrace, and we think it's a very unique feature to the project. Here we have some landscape imagery that shows you the type of planting material and amenities that will be included within the project. Enhanced items such as pottery, plenty of lounge seating, and cabanas within the pool area. We actually have included some nighttime views to give you some distinction in the, what you're seeing. Here we're articulating the corner of Scott and Corinthian. I think it's important to point out the level of detail even on the highest levels of the building with respect to the architecture treatments. This enlarged elevation shows you a typical use where the materials that you're seeing on the board in front of you would be utilized. The fabric canopies, the vinyl glass doors, the metal railings, and the stone veneer all add quality material and interest to the project. We've also canvassed the area to look for similar projects. 2D renderings tend not to make it very obvious what this would ultimately look like. The Carlisle, while very drastically different in architecture, represents the closest residential development within Newport Beach. We've also included Villa Sienna, which is located at the corner of Jamboree and Michelson, which some of you may be familiar with. Has a very similar style of architecture and includes many of the enhanced quality materials that our project proposes. Here you can see the arched entryways, very similar to what our project is including, the metal railings, the enhanced stone veneer, and the stucco treatment. I think one other important point to bring up, and I'll go into more detail about this later, is the fact that from this perspective, it appears as though the roof of this building is a single height. When you actually change the view, you can also see on the Village at Irvine spectrum from down at street level, the roof appears to be
Please hold on. Yeah, I can't lose a core in here, sorry. Sorry, you need to come back.
That's okay. The Village at Irvine spectrum provides another comparison of a point I will bring up later with regard to building height. This also includes enhanced quality materials that are going to be extremely similar to what we're demonstrating within our project. Here, along the retail component of the Village at Irvine spectrum, you can see the stone veneer, the canvas awnings, and the wrought iron railings on the windows above. The pool courtyard of our project very similarly matches another development, the Village at Irvine spectrum. Here you can see the enhanced treatments, very similar to what we will also provide. One of the other items of topic from the Planning Commission study session was the overall building heights and setbacks. This illustration shows the overall building heights for the area. Our minimum building height is 55 feet 6 inches. We have intermediate heights of 63 feet 5 inches, which are the top floor residential units where the architect has chosen to enhance the residence by increasing the ceiling height. We also have a maximum height of 69 foot 11 inches in the areas bound in blue. Those are the areas where loft units have been incorporated to provide another area of visual interest within the project. Along the entire project, the maximum height reaches 79 feet. The areas bound in red are the tower elements that are the areas that reach that maximum height. The purpose of these tower elements are to provide fire access to the flat roof, to help to disguise some of the mechanical equipment necessary for elevators and air conditioning units. But as you can see, for the total building area, the percentage of the maximum height is less than 3.5%. We've created sections to demonstrate where those different heights occur within the project. At the corner of Scott and Dove, where the retail component is situated, the maximum ceiling on that is 46 feet. Continuing along to an area along Martingale, we have 55 feet 11 inches as demonstrated, which shows the 2 garage areas and the 4 residential stories above that. This section demonstrates the areas in which the ceiling height on the 4th floor retail residential units was increased to 12 feet, and the cavity space between that ceiling height and the peak of the roof is 7 feet 7 inches. And lastly, as far as residential, we have the areas where the loft units were integrated. There is a 9-foot clearance on the loft units with a 6-foot 11-inch cavity. This here shows the section at the tower element. It introduces what we think is very important to point out. Those higher areas provide fire access to the fire department to the flat roof section of the project. Here we're demonstrating the areas of different heights. At the corner where the retail component is introduced, we have a height of 46 feet. The next highest would be 55, continuing on to 63, 69, and the tower elements in the distance are at the maximum height of 79 feet.
Excuse me, I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
Right here. Explain what is going on. I see the orangish building, 1, 2, 3 levels. Tell us, is that retail?
Sorry?
Do a cross section?
The cross section of, I'm sorry,
Well,
the
tell us
orange.
what's happening. I assume that the restaurant or retail will be on the ground.
Correct.
There looks like 2 levels and a loft above it, is that correct? What's going on in those levels?
So on the ground floor at the corner of Scott and Dove, we do have the retail introduced. I'm actually going to flip back a couple of sections to demonstrate that area for you. We have some community space that's introduced above that, and that includes a clubhouse. We also have a fitness area on the 3rd floor, and then that 4th floor will incorporate that rooftop terrace.
Thank you.
Moving on to the setbacks that have been modified for the project. We wanted to ensure that the project provided a walkable neighborhood feel. The city has an existing 10-foot right-of-way that would be in addition to the 30-foot setback from the property line. That would mean if we adhered to the 30-foot setback, we would have 40 feet from curb to the building. In order to make sure that we're not creating an isolated, remote residential island, and we're introducing more of a walkable neighborhood and encouraging this to be more an inclusionary part of the of the surrounding uses, we have requested the modified setbacks. Along Dove, the setbacks vary from 26 feet to 29 feet from the property line, which would be 36 feet to 39 feet from the curb. Here we have a visualization of what that would look like. As you can see, it still allows for a generous amount of landscaping, but promotes the walkability to the existing sidewalks surrounding the project. Continuing to Scott, the setbacks vary from 24 feet to 30 feet from the property line, 34 feet to 40 feet from the street. Here's a visualization of this area. Again, providing some privacy for the residential units on the ground floor, but still incorporating the project within the surrounding vicinity as a whole. Corinthian Way, the shortest distance between the setbacks is setback 18 feet to 18 feet the entire run of the street, which is 28 feet from the curb. We have included stoops along this area to promote the walkability and connection to the surrounding street. And finally, Martingale with a setback of 20 feet, 30 feet from the street. Here's the visualization. The setback along this area does allow us to incorporate as many of the existing mature trees that are on site as possible. Our intent is to keep as many of those as possible during the construction and after the project completion. The open space area has also been a topic of conversation with regard to the project. We feel that we are meeting the intent of the layout for this open space area. We recognize and agree with staff that it doesn't fit the true definition of a neighborhood park. We have provided both passive and active recreational opportunities within this open space. We've introduced a great lawn area that could be utilized for either or, passive or active, and are also considering incorporating more active uses such as a bocce ball court or tetherball area, but with the layout and the spacing, it is somewhat limited. Here we have another view of this open space from the cul-de-sac at Martingale and the adjacent parking lot. We are proposing and requesting that the open space be fenced with decorative tubular steel fencing and gated beyond daylight hours for the security of the residents. In this visualization, we are not showing landscape buffering along the tubular steel fencing, but it is our intent to introduce that buffer so that anyone utilizing this open space is not staring into the adjacent parking lot and looking at all of the parked cars. We have a couple of other visuals of this open space area, including the stoops within this area. We will ensure that privacy and security of those units will occur. The fencing and gating of the open space beyond daylight hours will help the project to ensure that that does not become an issue. Here we have a nighttime view of the open space. And a second. Retail space within the area is a definite concern that was raised in the previous Planning Commission public hearing, study session, and has been raised by the responses that staff has received. One of the things that we feel is important to point out is that we are not required to provide retail space, but we do feel it is important to provide that. The existing site is comprised of 8 separate buildings. The redevelopment of the project would eliminate the existing inventory of retail space. As you can see, over 59% of the retail space is comprised of restaurant and food service, with the other uses including medical and dental, nail and hair salons, liquor stores, fitness and dance studios, dry cleaning establishments, specialty retail, and general office. One of the things that was analyzed after the study session with you was the availability of similar uses of this type within the area. When this analysis was performed, it was determined that the area actually includes a surplus of retail. What you can see from this diagram is an existing dining establishment. It ranges from fast food to quality dining. It includes over 45 restaurant uses within a half-mile radius of the project. This does not include any of the existing uses that would be removed as part of the redevelopment. I'll let you give me the signal when you're ready for me to move on. Additionally, we surveyed the area for other existing retail and services, things that you would generally see incorporated within the retail component of a mixed-use project of this type. Anything from medical and dental uses to veterinary services, dry cleaning, pharmacies, hair and nail salons, car washes, fitness studios, convenience stores. As you can see, the area is populated with a numerous amount of those uses, and in some cases, a multitude of the same use. For example, we have 3 car washes, we have 3 dry cleaning establishments, we have 5 nail and hair salons, all within that half-mile radius. We also have gone out and done some community outreach to the existing businesses within that half-mile radius. We found that it was important to ensure that they felt comfortable with the inclusion of the residential and felt that additional retail would not be beneficial. One of the reasons that we as an applicant and as a development have chosen not to introduce more retail is it concerns us in that we don't want to create a situation for blight where we introduce retail that lies vacant or introduces a use that cannot sustain itself. We feel that the surrounding businesses will benefit from anyone who would utilize the existing retail, say the dry cleaning or the hair salon, now utilizing the other businesses in the area that provide the same services. So I do have, if you'd like them, the copies of the petition that was signed by the surrounding businesses. But at this time, I welcome any comments or questions from the commissioners.
Thank you. Any questions from the applicant? Commissioner Sack.
First, on the park issue, when we had the study session and then when I actually subsequently met with the applicant and went through their plans and provided some recommendations. And at that point in time, I didn't have a full appreciation that you're retaining ownership of the park, or the open space area, I should say, in order to increase your density. With that said, and then I also didn't have an appreciation for that there was just a public access easement over just the sidewalk portion of the area. And I know you're painting in Lucy on top of that. So, but, you know, you've got some really wide, inherently wide areas around the property because there's already a large right-of-way that you're landscaping and then the additional setback, you know, there's setback variances. But you've got units fronting all those streets, and then you've got units fronting the open space. So I'm trying to understand why you want to enclose this open space area and why you wouldn't expand the public access easement over the entire open space area.
The reason that we're looking to enclose the public open space, and I'll actually flip back to one of the views, it would be open to the general public during daylight hours. One of our main concerns with respect to enclosing that is the security of the residents beyond daylight hours. The surrounding uses are all comprised of office uses and retail that generate business from 9 to 5, say.
What is what's the difference between those units that front the open space and the units that front other perimeters of the project on the ground floor?
With respect to security, they will have the same level of security. We're going to ensure that that's taken care of. One of the other reasons that we had for enclosing this open space beyond daylight hours is the fact that we would prefer to maintain and secure that area after dark ourselves. We don't want to put the impetus on the New City's police department if something were to occur in that space. There's really not any reason for that space to be utilized after dark. Public parks and spaces within the city are generally closed after daylight hours as a general rule anyways. So there's really not, with the exception of residents, any reason for this space to be open for use beyond, in our opinion, beyond daylight hours. Including that tubular steel fencing and gating also helps to discourage cross-lot travel between the adjacent office use with their surface parking lot and our development. As it currently stands, there is no fencing between the existing sites, and generally people traveling, we're traveling to that retail area and we're traveling through the parking lot. So we believe that it would be the preference of the adjacent office building to have that physical barrier.
Look, if you weren't using this open space area to increase your density, I think I'd be way more receptive to having the fence around it and closing it at night. That's just my opinion, but we can, I'm sure commissioners have other questions.
I want to keep on this slide because it's important. That's Martingale. You show that as a 2-lane in one in each direction there, but I'm just pulling up Google Earth here. It's just a single lane, and there it's littered with cars up and down. And then I counted 5 access points from the surrounding businesses that go in and out. This street seems like a mess. If you're going to have, that's the main resident entrance right there on that street, correct? That's for residents only.
It's a residential only address, an entrance. We do have 2 other entrances off of Dove and Scott that will be residential and visitor.
What would be the percentage of the residents that would be entering off of this street?
I believe that actually it would be the smallest percentage of the 3. The most highly traveled streets surrounding the project are Dove and Scott. We're anticipating traffic both from the 73 and 405, and believe that most residents would travel via Birch or Campus to Dove and would utilize the Scott or Dove entries.
Maybe coming in, but coming out to leave, I think it's going to be a heavy traffic area. And all there is a stop sign at the end that then merges you onto that street. I have great concern with the amount of cars coming in and out from the businesses. I drove this a couple times just to kind of get my bearings different times of the day there. And if they're going to have a pedestrian access coming from the park there, it seems very likely that somebody's going to get hit. And I was driving around there and I almost got hit by several cars. And, I'm a pretty good driver. But this seems like a mess in that area there, and I have some concerns. Your diagrams look great, but they're certainly not that wide, and there's certainly no cars on the street parking, and every time I've been there, that street is just completely littered, so.
We actually share your concern about the existing parking situation on Martingale. If we had our choice, there wouldn't be parking necessarily.
Yeah, but this is a
But-
business area, and
Correct.
these are probably cars that are part of the businesses that are surrounding.
We actually did a parking survey, and we had our staff out in that area starting at 6 a.m. to analyze who was parking along Martingale and where their end destination was. 90% of the parking that's occurring on Martingale currently is due to a rental car establishment off of Birch.
These don't look like rental cars to me here.
It's the employees of the rental car establishment parking there and walking to their business.
So every one of the rental car companies in John Wayne Airport?
No, it is a single rental cars business that their employees are parking there and then walking to the business.
Cars.
It's 34 cars that are parked there on average. And we share that concern, and we actually would aim to work with staff to come up with a resolution that would work for everyone involved, including the surrounding businesses, whether that be parking spaces that are limited by time or metered parking, something to help alleviate the existing congestion that's out in that area.
Your residents will also be parking there too, or their guests.
We have designated guest spaces and
You do, but
assigned
that doesn't
residential.
mean that they're not going to.
Correct, which we feel that in working with staff, either a time-limited parking situation or a metered parking situation would help to dissuade that and alleviate the existing congestion that's occurring.
That just costs staff more money, and put more employees to enforce. Okay, so at the north end, I noticed some of the landscaping. I think I answered my question, but there's plenty of places if you're at the north end, if you will be allowing dogs at this for residents to have.
Yes.
Will there be adequate spaces for them to walk their
Yes.
dogs? Do you encourage them internally or externally? And would you encourage them at this open space area?
We would encourage internally and externally. We've also incorporated lawn spaces up on the podium, as well as various courtyards. And we would encourage people to utilize the open space for pets. We would have the proper amenities in place to ensure that cleanup occurs accordingly. But we have maintained the setbacks with the thought in mind that pets are welcome in this development, and we do want to promote walking and the residents' pets surrounding the area.
But we promote it more in the open space area, the part that the public would, or would you kind of exclude that? Because, that's one thing I don't really want to do is go to an open space, or if I was a surrounding tenant, and then that's the only main place that people are taking their dogs.
There are no plans to incorporate a dog park within the open space.
And then in another statement you made that you had a short time frame on this, like what, if we approve it, how fast would you be, starting to get the...
Our staff is ready to be permit ready within 6 months, and from the start of construction, we expect the duration of construction to be less than 2 years.
So starting within 2 years?
Completion within 2 years of when the permits are pulled.
Because you have one applicant or one person who leases in there that has a lease of over a year.
Correct.
Correct. So how are you working to mitigate that with the business?
The property owner has been working with the tenants to mitigate the leases. That is still an ongoing discussion and something that will occur once the approval or once entitlement has completed. It's something that they're having ongoing discussion with the tenant regarding.
And who on your staff has been doing that?
It's the property owner himself.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's interesting, because I asked a couple of the businesses there, and they haven't had any communication with me yet. So.
He has his staff here, and I'm not sure if he would like to respond to that.
Yeah, because I met with one of your consultants, former Councilman Rosansky, and I brought up that issue, and he said he was going to try to look into that. And I hadn't heard back from them. And when I talked to some of the owners just recently, just this Tuesday, they have yet to talk to the owner. They put in repeated phone calls and been trying to work on this since this came with our study session and others. So,
Some of the existing leases are month to month.
at least over a year.
Correct.
And then one other area that I had, and I think this was addressed in the other project, but the residents, their children will be going to Santa Ana Unified School District.
As the district boundaries lie, yes.
So have you had any conversation with city staff or with the school districts or with the other property that is going online to try to come up with a solution to that, to try to see if we could get these children to come to Newport Mesa schools?
We have had conversation with the school district, and we are going to be processing through the application to try to have the property annexed from Santa Ana Unified School District and included within the Newport Mesa School District. As to where we are on that, it hasn't gotten much further than just the discussion at this point.
Sure, I understand.
It's a rather difficult process.
Yeah.
So where is the local school, both on a elementary and high school?
For Santa Ana Unified School District, both elementary and high school are located north of the 55 freeway from our location.
So what's the, what's the name of the school, or how far is that in terms of distance?
Let me see if I have that. The elementary school is Taft School off of Keller Street. The intermediate school is Douglas MacArthur Fundamental, and that's off of West Alton Avenue. And the high school would either be Segerstrom High School off of MacArthur or Saddleback High School off of Flower.
So, Tony, did you include all these additional trips that are going to be generated due to these schools being so far away? Buses, things like that?
No, we didn't get into the level of detail on school traffic.
Doesn't that have an impact on things?
Well, fundamentally, when you're doing a traffic analysis and you're looking at trip generation for residential, that would take into account all types of traffic associated with the residential. If it's trips to shopping and school and work, it's all factored into the trip generation.
Can I just, almost done.
Sure.
And to build on that, will you be giving proper notice to the residents when they sign their lease that they know that they're getting into Santa Ana Unified Schools or not Newport Mesa schools?
If it is a condition of approval, yes, we will.
So you would accept if I made a condition that said that you must disclose that up front?
Yes. The project is required to provide additional disclosures with respect to the airport, so that would be included with that packet that's provided to residents.
Commissioner Getty?
Brittany, let's go back to the 5,677 square foot, you call it retail space. I think it was described as a restaurant.
Over 50%.
What are you planning? That's a rather large restaurant in that kind of a location. So I'm curious, are you looking at maybe a smaller restaurant and some service retail down there? What's the plan?
The design of the space currently is one singular quality restaurant use, and the reason that it's laid out that way was per staff's recommendation that quality restaurant use has the highest traffic and parking requirement. So we wanted to ensure that regardless of what use went into the retail space, whether it was broken down into smaller uses and multiple uses, or remained as one large use, that we were including enough parking. So the design of it currently shows as a quality restaurant, one use to allow us to provide the maximum amount of parking that would be required per the code. With respect to how ultimately that retail space will lay out, it has not been determined at this point. It's a discussion that will happen with the property owner once the entitlement has occurred, and it largely would be represented by what tenants would be interested in occupying the spaces. Again, it's a bit premature for him to obligate himself to a certain use or a certain business at this point in the juncture, but there's no reason that that space could not be broken down into multiple uses if that's what demand dictates.
And then a follow-up. I didn't see the graphic, and I think you have one showing the retail, restaurant, parking, how they come in and go out, and guest parking. Could you show us that graphic?
Sure. Actually, Rosalind, if you wouldn't mind pulling up the supplemental PDF that is the access and circulation, that more clearly demonstrates the access in and out of the project for both residents and visitors, as well as retail. As you can see here, the blue indicates the pedestrian kind of circulation from the surrounding sidewalk. The orange indicates the vehicular circulation. The entries off of Dove Street and Scott Drive will be publicly accessible for visitors of the residence, visitors of the retail establishment, and residential. The Martingale vehicular access will be restricted and gated for residents' use only. On the left-hand side, towards the restaurant component, you can see that we've included restaurant parking. We have included 71 parking spaces for that restaurant or retail use, separate from the guest parking and residential.
So how do you separate it? Obviously, the restaurant and guest parking come and go, there's no gate or
Correct.
code or anything.
Illustrated here, if you're able to zoom in just a tiny bit, Rosalind, we have a purple line running down the center of this graphic that shows the gating and access that separates the tenant parking from the guest and restaurant parking. So there will be fencing and gating along that purple indication line that will allow residents to pass through, but not allow guests or restaurant patrons to enter that portion of the parking structure.
You did shrink this a little bit for me. Make it smaller so we can see the perimeter of the building. Right, yeah. So coming back to Mr. Zach, on the bottom, says residential, are these at grade level?
Those
Pardon me, and on Scott and on, a little bit on Martin.
Sure. The residential component that's introduced on both the open space area on Scott and on Corinthian are all elevated from the surrounding street by 5 feet. This allows us to provide privacy to those units and introduce the stoops that provide the connectivity from the podium, or I'm sorry, from those residents to the surrounding sidewalks.
Oh, that's all I have for the moment.
Surprising. We're not grilling you or anything. I don't want you to feel that way.
It's not 4th of July yet. I'll come back for that.
You're doing a very good job, Rick.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. I think at this point, then, you can step down and we'll open it up to general public comments. So I invite speakers to come forward. You have a 3-minute limit, and please fill out the speaker card.
Chairman Kramer and Commissioners, my name is Dennis Baker. I have an office a couple blocks from here down on Whale and Birch, and so I have just a couple comments that I wanted to make. So one of the things there was a reference to the traffic in the area, and she made a reference to, I believe, that Birch would not, they didn't anticipate Birch would be used a lot. Birch is used quite heavily in the early, at the work hours, both ways. In fact, it can be very difficult even getting out of my parking lot onto Birch because everyone's going down to get on the 73, so, and the traffic backs up there. And more of an observation. The biggest concern I have is on the park. So this is one project and this is one piece of space and there's one park that's not going to be made. But as was shown earlier, there's an overlay, which means that the current businesses are going to be going away. In fact, a lot of the businesses that were referenced in the diagram to say there's all these businesses here and the little dots and so on, a lot of those businesses are going to go away as a result of additional residential that's coming into the area. So if we start out right away now with, well, you don't have to put a park in, and then the next one comes in, well, you don't, we're going to let you off too, and pretty soon you're going to have a lot of residences, and you're going to look back and you've given away the park space. So I do have a very strong concern about the idea of allowing a development to come in. There's, the general plan says there should be some public park space associated with that, and we're going to not have that. So I'm really concerned about the precedent. Thank you.
My name is Joe Bell, and I'm president of the Southern California Pilots Association. We have over 1,300 members, and a lot of them actually fly in and out of John Wayne Airport. And what I'd like to do is present to you some evidence that this is probably a very bad idea to have this many residents this close to the airport. And I've got some good data to show you or to explain to you why I feel that way. Number one, the noise itself is of course inherent, and this facility is actually going to be very close to the left-hand runway, runway 20 left out of John Wayne Airport. All of the takeoffs, virtually all of the takeoffs out of that airport will fly directly over this residential area. And that'll be anywhere from about 300 to 600 feet above sea level. So you're really talking about low-flying aircraft over the residential area. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is that a propeller-driven airplane has a very loud and raspy sound as it comes because of the propeller tips are actually reaching sonic speed upon takeoff power. So the amplified noise of that particular sound is really carries a long ways, and it's something that you would have a lot of complaints from the residents right away. They want to close the airport, obviously, which is not going to happen. The thing that a lot of people don't realize is that any aircraft, anybody, any kind of aircraft that flies over an area emits particles. You're going to have exhaust particles, which consist of soot and oil, and this falls down on the residents below. It's inherent with aircraft, and something that we've had ever since the Wright brothers. So it's something that you need to take into consideration. You're going to have some very, very unhappy tenants if you have a bunch of people moving in with airplanes flying over. I monitored this with software that John Wayne Airport provides. It's right on the internet. You can do it yourself. That you can monitor the air traffic. And I looked at that yesterday, about 1:15 in the afternoon. I looked at it for about 20 minutes, and over that period I had about 8 to 10 airplanes that I could see taking off from the left runway. Every one of them virtually flew directly over the area that you're proposing to build this high-density residential area. I think that, and I can present the data. In fact, Fred just gave you a map of one of the data of the aircrafts that I monitored. So if you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to talk to you about it.
Is that the blue plane?
I beg your pardon?
The blue?
Yeah, it's a part of the software. It actually has 3 different colors of aircraft that are flying over, one that for departures and then one for arrivals. The blues are the arrivals.
Thank you.
And yeah, and a good number of the aircraft that use the left runway are student pilots. So there's a lot of traffic that is consistent throughout the day. Any day that you have VFR flight conditions, so you'll see them out practicing under instruction. Yeah. Okay.
Next.
I'm Fred Forche, resident of Corona Del Mar. I've lived here in Newport Beach for 40 years. I have a business over at MacArthur and Von Carmen, and I'm also a property owner at 4340 Von Carmen, which is part of the Coal Center in Newport. The development, this infill of our parking lots in the Coal Center area has me concerned, and just simply increasing the density is also a big issue to me. As a property owner, as a business owner in the area, we do have a lot of traffic that is starting to build up, and as more and more of the residential from the Irvine area moves in, just moving up and down Jamboree, especially at around 5 o'clock, you have multiple turns of the lights to get through. Even from Von Carmen, where my office is here, just to get onto MacArthur Boulevard is multiple turns of the light to get onto MacArthur Boulevard. So as we start seeing this traffic increase, I understand that the studies are saying we don't need to to look into this because, residential is less. I don't buy it. There's this thing that, live where you work, that kind of cancels the traffic out. Myself, I have no employees that live anywhere in the area. I don't know any other business owner in the area that has employees that live in some of this development. So my biggest concern here is the overall traffic impact of what it's going to do in the area, and also just the density. They're just moving more density in. We like our business park, and the Planning Commission is planning on doing all this, but they haven't really talked to the business owners in the area. They haven't talked to the building owners in the area. I've never been approached by anybody saying, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take the parking lot and turn it into condos or apartments. As far as the aircraft are concerned, just in general, putting that much residential next to an airport is just a bad idea. It's just not a great place. From, you've shown the diagrams, people sitting on their balconies, talking to each other. Can't do that. Planes fly over, it disrupts your conversation. And especially the left-hand traffic pattern that flies straight over this area of this development here. Those planes are coming over at just 100 feet, 200 feet right over top of that development. So their sky deck, they'll be able to literally reach up and touch those planes. So anyway, I just am against the idea of increasing the development or the density in the area, the traffic in the area, and putting residents in an area that should be zoned commercial. Thank you.
Hello, my name is John Santry. I live at 400 Carlotta, Newport Beach. I'm representing Shop Off Realty Investments. We sent you a letter to the chairman and the commissioners outlining some of our objectives here. Really, we're all in favor of the redevelopment of the airport area in Newport Beach. This is the place to put new residential. Obviously, it was passed in the general plan update in 2006. Our only grievance is we'd like to see all the developers in the area held to the same standards and it'd be equitable and fair.
Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for your consideration. My name is Jan Hollis, and I am the Director of Sales and Marketing for the Radisson Hotel in Newport Beach. And I'm here representing Pacific Hotel Management doing business as Radisson Hotel Newport Beach. Basically, this is the first we have heard. We have not been approached. We are, with the addition of the Fairmont, we are the largest producer of city tax as a business, a little over $1.5 million per year. The owner has owned the property since 2003. And the rationale, we have several, but the rationale for our opposing this position is that the restaurants, some who have been at the center for many years, serve the business complexes as well as the hotel guests, which occupy a little over 1,000 hotel rooms in the immediate area. The MacArthur Square food and beverage options, along with other businesses located in the square, represent viable selling features to groups, business travelers, and airline crews who request and require walkable food and beverage options in their RFPs. This square must remain a retail center that features restaurants and other business options necessary to serve the local business complexes and our hotel. To remove these current options and replace them with yet another residential complex would literally offer no walkable options to local business associates or hotel guests that require these services. We believe a residential complex would have a negative effect on both the hotels and the local businesses. In terms of traffic congestion, we offer shuttle to our hotel guests as an amenity. We also shuttle the airline crews that we do business with, and we are bound to FAA regulations to get them to the airport on time. We also just recently landed a very large contract crew that represents $8 million a year in revenue for the hotel. They looked at the city of Costa Mesa and Anaheim and chose Newport Beach, our area, because it is a commercial area, it's quiet, so there's a noise factor in terms of an international crew. They're day sleepers, so those people sleep during the day, and with this residential complex located literally right next to the hotel, we feel it would have an impact as far as that noise is concerned. So thank you for your time. We wanted to, again, share our concerns with you as a business. Our owner, again, has owned this hotel since 2003 in the city of Newport Beach. We also are members of Visit Newport Beach. I am on the marketing committee for Visit Newport Beach, so we are a very good Newport Beach citizen, and we bring a lot of revenue in for the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Kramer and Commissioners. My name is Dorothy Krause, and tonight I'm speaking on behalf of SPON, Still Protecting Our Newport. You may have seen SPON's letter in your agenda packet, but I'd like to highlight a few of our concerns from the letter. We request that before taking action on the residents at Newport Place or any other project for the airport area, that the Planning Commission and City Council initiate a specific area plan or a comprehensive plan for this area, and here are reasons. First of all, there is a lack of comprehensive planning for what was anticipated in the 2006 general plan for the airport area. The number of residential units was established in that plan, but the placement and design was left entirely for future determination. As it is, the projects are being prepared on a piecemeal basis, starting with Uptown Newport, and now the residences at Newport Place. The projects are very large, and because of underground parking, change the characteristic of the neighborhood significantly. On-ground parking is being eliminated, along with some retail opportunities that are needed by area businesses, which we just heard a moment ago from this lady. Another concern is that the area has no cohesive planning for nearby amenities for restaurants, such as a grocery store. Any complete neighborhood concept presumes a mixed-use development and should include neighborhood parks, green space, pedestrian ways that are not parking lots, 30-foot setbacks from the curb, retail amenities, and community amenities to truly sustain a work-live environment. Business owners are concerned about loss of parking, more traffic, and other amenities being lost. The area needs a streetscape plan, such as that being developed for the West Newport Mesa area, which is next coming up on your agenda tonight, so that there are appropriate setbacks, walkability, greenery, and a good-feeling neighborhood ambiance. Without an overall plan, each project will be taken up individually, some subject to a public vote under green light, some subject to lawsuits, and even referenda. And a cohesive plan would allow for properly planned use of public benefit funds that could benefit the area and encourage the right infrastructure like schools and facilities appropriate for that area. The airport area is an important part of our community and should be taken seriously as other planning areas. SPON's request is that you not take any action on the proposed residence at Newport Place tonight. The character of the airport should be carefully defined, and the impact of integrating residential within commercial zones should be understood prior to approving new projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Petrie. I'm a resident of Newport Beach, and I have an office at 1000 Coyle Street. And a lot of what I'm saying, and I'll say it quickly, reiterates and supports what was previously said. First of all, I'd like to compliment Brittany on the fact that I've never, for rooftop dining for the residents, or the rooftop area, I've never heard of that as the pleasure of watching planes take off and land at John Wayne Airport. I mean, it's always been a noise issue before, but that's a very positive spin. You're giving up 34,000 feet of restaurant space. 8, I think, last time I counted was 8 or 9 restaurants. That's going to be a hardship on the people who office around there. I know I saw a brochure for the car wash and Benihana property for sale. I think John Saunders may have an application pending or something regarding Saunders Plaza. So I support SPON and the others that ask for a more cohesive, specific plan for that area. And the traffic issue is not just subject to this one, as someone else said, both the parks and the traffic. You can't just take one project and look at it and say it falls underneath the requirements, because you're going to have 2, 3, 4, half a dozen more transitioning in that area. And my argument or suggestion would be, or request would be, that you do take the time and put a specific plan together for that airport area. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rick Roshan. I'm part owner of...
is kind of getting around that particular use. And so if they, I don't think they necessarily need gates. I understand why. It's just interesting that they're using that as an opportunity to increase the density. So as a local business owner, I think we're all about the redevelopment of the space. The main concern is ultimately the density that is being put into the space and the traffic, both in terms of children and safety for the city as it moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. I'll close the public comments. Close the public hearing, I should say. Bring it back to the commission. Additional comments? Discussion? Questions of staff?
Staff questions. Several items were pointed out by the public. I'm going to throw out 3 or 4, then you guys can answer them instead of one at a time. The airport, let's discuss that in a minute. Tell us about how that disqualified and the height of the buildings, etc. SPON and the comprehensive plan. I thought we just saw the comprehensive plan. It was done in '06, so you may want to secondly address that for me. The parking, we didn't have a lot of discussion about why they have a parking reduction, if they do. Maybe they don't. So I'd like you to share that with us. And the applicant may want to address this one, what they're proposing, what they think their pro forma is for bodies per apartment unit. I know that's a tricky one. Traffic analysis, that was brought up several times. Okay.
So just a point of clarification, prior to closing the public hearing, it's customary for the applicant to rebut, but you didn't come up. So I'm going to give you an opportunity here. Michael, what do I do here? Reopen the public? No, just let
it's
her?
just a rebuttal.
Okay, all right. Go ahead.
Thank you. I had asked Rosalind to sneak in here. I was waiting for the right opportunity. There are public comments that I did want to address. With respect to the park space, I think it's important to reemphasize that we are providing the half-acre space. The waiver is not to not provide that space. The open space will be there. It will be a half-acre maintained throughout the duration of the project or the life of the project. The waiver simply would be to allow the payment of the in lieu fee in return for the non-dedication of that space. So we would be fulfilling the general plan in what's envisioned within that as far as providing that open space and public park space. With respect to enclosing that space, we think it's important, given the surrounding uses and the hours of business, there really, again, isn't any reason to have that open space beyond daylight hours open to the public. We feel that it would provide an opportunity for a potential issue as far as security. We think that it's a better maintenance procedure for the project to be able to have that area enclosed after daylight hours. The reality of the shopping center is that it is a struggling retail shopping center. Many of the businesses that did occupy space there were not able to make a living there. The shopping center owner has not made any money on that shopping center since he purchased it back in 1974. So maintaining that as retail without any residential supporting uses in the area is not realistic at this point. The demand that feeds into that existing retail exists Monday to Friday during business hours. On the weekends and during the evenings, there's no one there to support the retail unless people are traveling to the area and creating a destination there. With respect to the Radisson, I'm very respectful of the concerns that they raised. We do want to highlight that there are still restaurants within walking distance, including one of my favorite new restaurants, Boss Cat Kitchen, which is right across the street from the Radisson. But we do respect the concerns that were raised. We do have FAA clearance up to 86 feet for the project with no demarcation or lighting that's necessary. That was granted over a year ago. We actually just renewed that clearance, so we have that for the start of construction, anticipating that that occurs soon. We are outside of the 65 decibel CNEL noise contour. It will be the impetus put on the development to ensure that soundproofing for the development is adequate. We don't want upset residents. We don't want people complaining about the airport noise. And that is one of the items that speaks to the enhanced quality of the materials that will be utilized, is to ensure that that soundproofing does not create extra nuisance noise from that airport. As staff mentioned, we're submitting a planned development permit application due to the ability to grant variances that have the potential to enhance the project. We feel that enhancing the project has been done through the modification of the setbacks, through the modification of the building height, and through the modification of the dedication of the park. It's not to say that there isn't also a benefit to the project with respect to the density for that open space. But we're not trying to circumvent or avoid any amendments or anything along those lines. We really are requesting the variances to the benefit of the project. We feel that without them, and with a flat roof at one height, it really wouldn't give the appeal and the architecture that the city is looking to incorporate in new residential developments. Any new residential development within an existing commercial space or industrial space is bound to have the potential for growing pains. What we would like to point out is that this is just one development in what is envisioned to potentially be greater development of a larger area. So we're hopeful that the demand, if that redevelopment occurs within those other properties, would help to dictate what the supply needs to be with respect to additional retail. One of the comments was with respect to the proximity of a grocery store, and I know that that was something that came up during the study session. And we do have a Ralph's supermarket that's 2.5 miles away. We have a Mother's Market that's 2 miles away, and the Irvine Ranch Market that's 1.5 miles away, with the expectation that in apartment living, generally, unless you're in an urban downtown area, you're not going to have a grocery store right next door. So residents would be utilizing pass-by trips on the way from one destination to the site to visit those locations for what they need. That's everything unless there are more specific questions.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Commissioner Ketting,
You had a list of questions for staff.
A couple of them should answer.
Okay, so which
Let's
ones?
start
did-
with parking.
were not answered?
Would you run through the parking analysis? Was there was a reduction in parking per unit, I recall, but I don't remember the formula, or correct me.
You started, handwritten page 16 has a matrix that talks about.
Say again, what page?
Handwritten page 16.
Huh? Got it?
I'll let Roz provide additional details.
So basically, on page 16, we have a table 2 that's basically identify the proposed parking ratio versus with the standard, as has been mentioned, as 2.5 units per acre. In this instance, the applicant is proposing a reduced parking standards that's allowed by the density bonus provision. So technically, they're in compliance with that provision. But comparing to the city's basic standard of 4 units or more, they're lower than that.
Okay. Why is it less than the standard? Is there something in this provision in this district that allows that?
State bonus density law actually provides and requires that we reduce parking for affordable housing projects. So our parking standard in our density bonus code is reflective of state law.
So they're in compliance?
They're in compliance, yes.
Thank you. Remember the other ones, huh? Airport, apparently everything's cleared for this whole area to have residential in it? The whole master plan, including this site?
Yes, it has. When the general plan was created, the Airport Land Use Commission reviewed the residential component in the airport area and did provide its clearance. They also reviewed the residential overlay for this and provided its clearance as well. And as the applicant indicated, the FAA has reviewed the project and does not find any threat to air navigation based on the clearance that they provided.
All right, and finally, I think I wrote down more times than not, traffic impacts to the area weren't addressed. And no traffic study would be required at the back end. Did I read that?
No, that's correct. And again, as staff, we're following the traffic phasing ordinance in terms of the requirements and when a traffic study should be prepared. And I don't have the discretion to say this project should have a traffic study, this SHOT project doesn't, unless it meets that threshold in the traffic phasing ordinance, which requires that study. And unless we want to step back or the council wants to step back and say, let's relook at the traffic phasing ordinance, let's perhaps change the thresholds. This project is below the thresholds in terms of the net number of trips from what is currently on the site. And so I understand that the community has real concerns with traffic and projects that are under discussion and coming through, and that's good. But we follow the TPO requirements and we follow the necessary standards to do those traffic studies, and this doesn't meet that threshold to get into a detailed level traffic study. We did the trip generation analysis. We see what the thresholds are. And the question that Chair Kramer had about, looking at a detailed traffic study and why there wasn't one done, just based on the net peak hour trips and previous projects that have been studied in the area, like Uptown Newport, I just would not expect to see impacts to area-wide intersections with the net difference. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
Commissioner Waller.
Maybe just a couple comments and thinking out loud. I mean, I think we're all fully supportive of redevelopment here, and but it obviously needs to be done smartly. In a project of this size, scope, magnitude, there are certain things that I think, regardless of the code, or common sense things you need to do, i.e. a traffic study or consideration for a development agreement when you begin a process like this. And so, one, I'm not over the development agreement thing. I can't say that it's not infill. I don't understand replacement versus additive. to me, a development agreement is warranted given the size, scope, and magnitude. To the lack of retail, clearly there's a need of retail. It's there. It's not, there's some arguments that it's not successful, but I just think a project of this size and scope warrants more retail that's more outwardly focused. The traffic study we've talked about, and then the open space, I think staff supported the deviation in the setback, namely because of the open space, and staff supported more density because of the open space, but it's really not open space if you're clearly signaling that it's cordoned off to the public. No one's going to use that. So to me, it's just speaking with the commission, it's a death of 1,000 cuts, and I'm not supportive of the project.
Okay. Commissioner Zach.
So, I'm having a tough time. I think this is a difficult one. I'm supportive of residential use in this area. I think that a really, really cool mixed-use project in this area would be awesome. And I think if there's an appropriate balance of retail and residential, it could just be a real home run, not only for the owner but for the community. But the problem I'm having is that, and so I'll just start off with that, and I'm just telling my colleagues up here that when I just think that through, just on a big picture standpoint, and I look at finding B as in boy, that the project would produce a development of higher quality and greater excellence of design than that might otherwise result from using the standard development regulations. We've got a bunch of different variances here, and so I'm not so sure that they make a project that's better than, if they just started over and start from scratch. I'm super sensitive to the developer that's been working on this project for over a year plus. I'm okay with the height variances. I'm okay with the setback variances. I believe that we started off the conversation, or some of my comments earlier, I believe these are additive units, and so it does warrant a development agreement, and that's contrary to what I had said in the study session, contrary to what I said when I met with the applicant. But after receiving the staff report and doing my analysis, it does seem like it warrants a development agreement, and again, I say it's a shame that wasn't told to the developer early on. So I think that's something that it's a policy decision that the council is going to have to consider. The dimension, we already said what I think about the open space. I think it would be wise if we move this project forward and approve it, that we add a condition that the public access cover the whole open space area, that there aren't gates. I think that because of the setback variances, I think there should be a condition requiring minimum tree sizes, because this is a large massing that's just coming into this area. And I know that the code allows for it, but I think the parking is going to be an issue. But again, it's a tough thing because the code allows for it. So I go back to finding B, and that's where I'm hung up on. Again, just kind of open discussion for my colleagues.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Commissioner Zach. I'll let Commissioner Wiegand talk, and then I'll sum it up.
I just had there was a lot of discussion on the airport and planes flying overhead. I'm pretty sure that the folks that are be renting these properties are not going to be tricked into thinking that there aren't any airplanes. I mean, the planes are going off constantly there. So there's no way that you can mistake. They're not going to be leasing these properties after hours when the planes subside. So, but I do think since there's going to be several properties that we're going to be seeing over the course of the next, 6 months, year, you alluded to for future schedules that we'd be seeing more projects up here in the airport area. And that one of the comments mentioned there was a Saunders property, which I haven't seen yet. But it might be important for staff to evaluate where residentials exist in other airports, maybe at Long Beach, maybe in San Diego, maybe other regional airports, to see what housing elements there in those surrounding communities. Are they rentals? Are they to purchase? So that we have an idea when we come back to these other properties, or if this project comes back again, we have the ability to kind of get an understanding what other cities have, what other airport communities have. While they're not Newport Beach, they still give us an important understanding of what the impacts are to those residents, how they're sold to those residents, and just the general understanding of how everything works in a community.
Thank you. Okay, to sum up, the night's getting long here. I think we've spent a lot of time on this project, both at the study session and then during the period of time between then and tonight. We spent a substantial amount of time this evening going through this project in detail, and obviously we all understand and have the same conclusion that this parcel, as it currently stands, is not, up to its, it's the highest and best use. It does need to be improved, for a whole host of reasons. And I and the other commissioners support a redevelopment of this parcel, and also support residential use there. However, the project as it's currently designed has numerous flaws to it that have been outlined. I don't need to go into additional detail on that. With respect to making the findings, I cannot make several findings. Those are findings A, 2, 3, and 5. So that is that the project is substantially consistent with the purpose, intent, goals, policies, and actions of the general plan and the municipal code, be substantially consistent with the purpose and intent of the zoning district, and be compatible with other development within the zoning district and general neighborhood of the proposed project. I have serious concerns about neighborhood compatibility and things like that I've already discussed in the past. And then I also have trouble and cannot make finding B, which Commissioner Zach outlined. And I cannot also make finding F, which is the design, location, operating characteristics, and size of the project would be compatible with the existing and future uses in the vicinity in terms of aesthetic values, character, skills, view, and protection. And then finally finding I, which is the increased height will not result in an undesirable or abrupt scale changes or relationships being created between the proposed structures and existing adjacent developments or public spaces. I think, I'm somewhat frustrated because I feel that there's a disservice here, and the disservice is really the general plan. I believe the general plan is inadequate for this area. I feel it's impractical on a whole host of levels. And I feel very, very strongly that that the applicant has not been well served by the general plan, and neither are the citizens of our city. And we're not a policy-making body here. We are here simply to interpret the general plan and the code and use common sense. So given the parameters of the jurisdiction that we have, and given the issues that have been outlined, I cannot support this project either. So I make a motion to deny this project based on the rationale that I've provided. Is there a second?
Second.
Any additional comments?
Yes, I think we all would like to see this redeveloped. Residential will work. I think the applicant didn't change anything that we recommended to look at from the March meeting. Didn't change anything according to the staff report. I think there's time for them to do that. I think they've heard the audience. They've heard our comments. I'm still not satisfied with the setbacks. They are improving the heights on the buildings. The architecture looks a little softer and better. I think, and I don't support a development agreement. I have to support staff and their research in the city attorney's office on how to read the way the policies of the cities are. Therefore, I would throw out an option to let them take this back and see if they can massage it, reduce it, take everything in the blender that they heard tonight and try to create a better plan. If it's better for them to get a denial, it seems like it's going that way, then their only option would be to appeal it to council. That plan. I think a better plan could be designed. That's my 2 cents before we vote.
So is that a recommendation for continuance? Like, how does that?
Well, even with the denial, there's going to be a continuance to the next meeting so that staff can prepare the appropriate conditions of denial. So that is built in, but basically it's baked at that point. So, Commissioner Ketting, I understand your position, but I have to say that there's policy issues here, even with putting this project on hold for who knows how long. I mean, this could take a year. I just don't think that's the right thing to do because we're not the policy-making body here for the reasons that I already discussed. So, there's a motion, there's a second.
Commissioner Kramer?
Yes.
We actually would like to request a continuance before the vote is taken. I understand what you are saying as far as policy-making decisions that are out of your hands, but we would like to take this back with the new information, the additional comments from the public, and relook at some of the issues and some of the areas that the findings are not adequate and bring this back to you at a later time.
With all due respect, that was the point of the study session, and no substantial changes were made during that period of time.
To be completely honest, we don't feel that we had the ability to provide the clarification, the justification for the design that we had chosen, and really did not have an opportunity to do much in terms of discussion with you individually until after that study session had occurred. And while we took your concerns into consideration, we did what we felt was most appropriate, was to reanalyze some of those concerns and to bring you additional information that hadn't been presented in that study session that we feel helps to justify why some of the changes weren't made. There were modifications to some of the areas. It didn't necessarily include all of the areas of concern, but we still feel there's an opportunity to make some additional changes prior to a vote being held.
I appreciate that. There's a motion and a second. I'm going to call for a vote. Please vote. Do I hear an alternate motion? No, he did not.
I did not, but I think under our rules, we have to act on this, or can an alternate be thrown out?
You can throw in an alternate.
Then I would recommend a continuance on this until the developer applicant takes under consideration all the comments heard tonight, which could mean a smaller project, it could mean more retail, it could be more traffic analysis, better access, and more open space possibly, among other things.
Commissioner Zach. Sure.
So let's say that motion that Commissioner Ketting just put forward got voted on and it was approved tonight, and the applicant said, no, I don't want to continue it, even though they just said publicly they want to continue it, and they just want to just take it straight to the city council. Do they have that option, or does they automatically have to come back here?
They'd have to come back to the planning commission.
Okay. I'll second the motion.
Before I call for a vote, I'd like Mr. Torres to provide some insight with respect to the alternate motion. And the impact on staff and the applicant for continuance of this for an indefinite amount of time.
I guess, Chairman Kramer, if I understand the alternate motion, and again, the way we would vote on this is alternate. If the alternate fails to pass, then it would return to your original motion, which would be the denial. The impact on staff, I think, would just be working with the, I don't know how long the continuance would be, but during that continuance period, we'd be working with the applicant, again, to try to implement some of the comments or questions to see if the project can be revised to address some of the issues here today. So there would be additional staff time involved in that process.
And if the alternate motion failed and the original motion passed with the denial, the applicant is, of course, free to appeal that to City Council.
You're absolutely correct, Mr. Chairman.
And during that period of time, whatever it may be, it could be months, right? Depending on how it works with staff. In effect, the same thing could occur where the applicant's working with staff to try to create a better project. Is that correct?
That's correct, and that regularly occurs for an item that's appealed or otherwise called for review. The applicant can change the project, the City Council can refer the project back to the Planning Commission. All options are still on the table.
So, fellow commissioners, I strongly recommend that the alternate motion be denied and that we vote on the original motion. But there's a second, so I'll do a call for the alternate motion at this point. Call to vote.
Just to clarify before you vote, the alternate motion is to continue this item. I'm sorry, was it to a date certain?
No, indefinitely.
To an undetermined date.
Undetermined.
Motion fails 3-2 with Commissioners Weigand, Kramer, and Lawler voting no.
Okay, so now we'll go back to my original motion. There's a second by Commissioner Lawler. Call to vote.
Just to clarify before you vote, this motion is to deny the project and direct staff to return with a resolution recording the findings of denial.
Motion carries 4-1 with Commissioner Getting voting no.
So, to the applicant, I think you please take into account everything that was stated here this evening. Obviously, there's deficiencies that need to be worked out, and you're free to appeal to City Council. Okay, next item.
Or reapply.
Or reapply. Next item. Okay, Brenda, could we postpone this item number 6 to the next?
We do have our consultants here that have been waiting for this item. And we have some residents here as well. We can make it very brief. This is not going to be the only time
Okay.
the Plan Commission will see this item.
Okay, let's do this. Can we take a 5-minute break?
Of course.
Okay.
Thank you.
So let's take a 5-minute break, return here. So a call to order back. Recess is suspended. The bell has rung. The gavel has come down. And I'm losing my mind. It's 10:15 somewhere. Okay. So next item is current business, item number 6, West Newport Mesa Streetscape. Did Jim Mosier leave? Is he okay? That concerns me, just leaving the backpack,
We may have to call a bomb.
It's not being videotaped, so. Oh, okay, all right. Okay, so West Newport Mesa Streetscape Master Plan. Is there a staff presentation?
Yes, this is the second time the Plan Commission has seen our progress in the Streetscape Master Plan. And I'm going to turn it over to Brian Hannigan from RM Design, who's been helping us with this effort. You will be seeing this again. So this is just another chance for you to see where we're at, and we'll bring it back to you for final recommendation for City Council's consideration in July. Sorry.
Okay, so I know you have a presentation. I've read through it. It's quite good. But I'd just like to start with the timeline first. So I think it's actually the last slide. So just to remind the Commission that we're essentially more than halfway through this process, right? So it started in January with some stakeholder meetings, some workshops. Today's the Planning Commission meeting. Then there'll be some open houses, and then another Planning Commission final review in July. And then finally City Council adoption July 26th. So
We can go now?
yeah, no. So at that point, go ahead.
Well, good evening. I was going to say good night, but that's not always a great start, so I'll keep it at evening. Brian Hannigan with RM Design Group. So the first slide, and again, this is just an update tonight. So what we've done is we've kind of been organizing everything so that we can get input from the public, come back to you. We've done that once before. The study area is the public realm within the streets that are identified on the plan. Superior, Placentia, Monrovia, 16th Street Production, and 15th Street. Some of the goals that we had were to identify a theme and trying to really just bring each of those streets together with complete streets principles, landscaping, looking for ways to improve the street frontage for pedestrians for more walkability, and look for areas where we can do a little bit of traffic calming. Show those in a few moments. So our second public workshop was one where we, the first one we gathered input from the public, the second one we came back with some of the ideas that we heard, and we tried to take those ideas and map them so we could start to develop the master plan elements. So from that effort, we took the plan and we created these sort of icons of the 10 most important items that the public brought up, and we kind of mapped them on the plan, and we had just large printouts of their ideas and thoughts that they shared with us the first round. And we selected in that effort some street furnishings and ideas of what they wanted to see within the corridor, within the streetscape. Bus shelters and benches and lights, trash cans.
We'll have those skateboard protectors on.
Yes, actually the bench at the top that you see, it does come with the handrail in the middle, so it prevents people getting too comfortable and sleeping and skateboarding. So. And then we looked at landscape ways to increase the shade and landscaping, looking for opportunities to create just more drought-tolerant plantings. There's already been some projects that have that the city did on Monrovia and on 15th Street, so we're going to take from those and kind of keep implementing that on these streets. We just looked at the existing conditions and then just compared again with what the public was sharing with us about how to increase the landscaping and look for opportunities for shade and beautification and more walkability. So this is just a quick existing and proposed view of Placentia Avenue. So the upper left is the existing condition. You can kind of see it's wide and open. There is an opportunity to provide two medians, a longer one and a shorter one, and you can see the difference that it makes just in the appearance of the street, and we feel that it'll help to calm traffic and create a little more greenery. That's just a side view of where those two medians are. The left turn pockets there. And a quick section to show how it changes that appearance of the street section. It's a photo simulation of that view down Placentia, and with the additional medians and landscape parkways. We did this also for Superior, looked at, Superior has a little less of a need for a lot of improvements because it already has a median and there's some quite a bit of landscaping, but there are some places we can find to add trees and some of the landscaping. Other ideas was to take out the grass in the parkways and start looking at more native and drought-tolerant plantings to reduce water. And then lighting where there's some dark areas along the street. On Monrovia and 16th, Production and 15th, there's some similarities in the street characteristics, so we want to kind of group those together and how we'd treat the sidewalk and parkways. This is an example of the existing intersections and how we can bulb out the corners to reduce the crossing distances, especially near the schools there. Hence the crossing striping. And this is along 15th Street, and we are looking at ways to, again, just beautify the street, look for more ways to provide sidewalks and landscaping in some of the wider areas where we have to work with. And then just some bike share markings for bike access through there, make aware that there are bikes present.
So we still have problems with overhead power lines. I see them in all the graphics.
We do, yes. There are overhead power lines. We would use the smaller tree species for those areas, and then encourage landscaping in the 15-foot future 15-foot setbacks where there isn't any power lines. Undergrounding, it's something that would take the effort from the city to have to look at how to do that and the expense of doing that. But
if somebody redevelops half a block of building, are they required to underground or put money in for undergrounding? So eventually there's a pot of money to do it?
Not on a project-by-project basis. How the city has been successful in the past with undergrounding has been through assessment districts.
Yeah.
And Tony can talk to you about that process. I mean, it requires buy-off from the property owners, but...
Right. I mean, I don't think it's been something where a project comes in and you can condition that they underground. But, right, it would be something working with the property owners in general to develop an assessment district.
I've had plenty of projects that I've developed that I've had a condition on my project that I have to underground the frontage of overhead lines. Is that the city doesn't want to do that?
That hasn't been my experience here.
Okay.
Like I said, the underground districts that we have are predominantly in residential areas, and then ultimately it becomes an assessment.
There was a condition of approval for Uptown Newport.
Right, and that was right along the frontage along Jamboree, and there were large overhead power lines, and in that case, that's the only one I can think of, and that was a really large project.
By the way, those still haven't totally been undergrounded, so maybe you could provide a status update on that next time. It is a pet peeve of mine. Go ahead, sorry.
So in conclusion, our plan is to develop a master plan that helps guide these improvements along the streets. We're going to break it into each street so that there's tangible projects within the district, within the area, and then also give guidance to developers as they come in to do projects. They'll have an understanding how to deal with the 15-foot setback and the frontage. So, and then we had already seen the last slide, which was the schedule ahead. So we'll be back to visit you. We have one more public outreach to share with them all of the ideas that were shared with us through that process, and then come back to you in July with the plan.
Great. I think it looks really good, very reasonable, well thought out. Any other comments from the commission?
What about did we talk about a signage plan with this? Or eventually that they can follow and use similar materials?
The scope does include a wayfinding type of sign program, not commercial related though. This would be purely signage related into the right-of-way for directional to surrounding destinations.
My other comment is wherever you can get a median is really.
Okay, open up to public hearing.
Chair Kramer and members of the Commission, my name is Jim Mosier. Regarding the undergrounding question, as I don't know how many City Council meetings you follow, there is another option for undergrounding, which is called Rule 20A, where a portion of the utility bill that everybody pays is collected by Edison, and that money can be used for undergrounding on public major arteries or scenic roads. And I don't know if any of these roads would be eligible for that or not, but it's a possibility separate from the other one you were discussing. What I really wanted to say, and I know the hour is late, but 2 nights ago, Tuesday night, where you were sitting at a much more reasonable hour of the evening, the city's Parks, Beach, and Recreation Commission was sitting here, and I made a promise to them that since this item I saw was on your agenda, I would speak to you and through you to the planning staff about this. There is in my view, a defect in the timeline here on the back of the presentation we see, in that there is another body that should be reviewing this, which is namely the Parks, Beach, and Recreation Commission, and they, like you, have certain powers and duties that are assigned to them by the people of Newport Beach in our city charter. Their powers and duties are more specific, actually, than yours, and they include advising the City Council on all matters pertaining to parks, beaches, recreation, parkways, and street trees. And the slides here show quite a lot about parkways and changes to street trees. So I think before this goes to the City Council, the people of Newport Beach expect it to be reviewed by them as well as by you. Thank you.
So, Brenda, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a really good point.
Okay, so my suggestion is prior to the final Planning Commission review that the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission review it. So that means that our July 7th would be pushed back and everything else would be.
Most likely, yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Chair Kramer and Commissioners, my name is Dennis Baker. I'm not going to ask to get involved in it from the committee standpoint, but I have my Water Quality Advisory Committee hat on right now, and I saw no mention of any green streets aspect of this regarding water quality, such as swales or so on. So I would ask that that be included someplace, a consideration of dealing with gutter runoff, permeable surfaces, and so on. And we do, and I'm sure the staff's familiar with them, we do happen to have a local company, a local resident, Pat Fusco, who's very knowledgeable in that, who I'm sure would be willing to provide some information regarding that. And I think that should be a strong consideration of any plan in this area. Thank you.
Was there any civil engineer that was involved in the preparation of the plan?
This is more at the conceptual level, and we get into further design elements. We would be getting engineering.
Okay, so
involved.
a directive would be that that take place. Okay, anything else? Okay, close the public comments. There's no action to be made by commission, so let's move on to the next item, which is director's report.
You have before you the tentative meeting agenda, and I'll use that to give you some highlights of what's happening. At next week's council meeting, the council will be looking at the appeal of the La Jolla variance that the Planning Commission reviewed a while back and denied that application. That was the one with the retaining wall in the front yard area, and the applicant has significantly modified that project, so it is staff's recommendation to the council for that project to come back to the Planning Commission. So you will be seeing that on your agenda sometime in the future.
So, okay, so it hasn't been calendared yet for...
Not for the Planning Commission, that's correct. We're waiting for the council to confirm that recommendation.
Okay.
So looking at your plan commission meetings going forward, June 23rd, we do have the study session scheduled for 150 Newport Center. The EIR is on the streets, and you should have received thumb drives with that document for your review. So at that meeting, we'll be going over the EIR as well as further details of the project. Also, Lita House Hotel, they are seeking some amendments to the general plan to allow them additional square footage. And then lastly, as mentioned earlier in tonight's meeting, the Plan Commission will be discussing whether or not Plan Commission meetings should be televised and perhaps forwarding any type of direction to the City Council for their consideration.
Okay, so June 23rd, 150 Newport, is that the car wash site?
That's correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And Lido House, what's the issue with the amendments there?
They are seeking a little bit additional square footage, and they do require a general plan amendment to do that. So it's a few extra square footage to allow some additional amenities on site. No additional hotel rooms.
Okay.
Will that also go all the way to Coastal Commission?
Yes, it will.
So what's the impact on the development project schedule?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think it's kind of doing some infill within the building envelope.
Yeah. Have they already started demo?
Right, they're demolishing it now. I think they can go forward when building the project, and just because it is within the building footprint, basically, it's kind of like filling in some of the breezeways and that type of thing, kind of what the Bay Club is doing in certain situations. So on to the July 7th meeting. The master plan from tonight, it was originally scheduled, but most likely we will postpone that, so allow us to go to the Parks Commission. Village Inn also is scheduled to come back. There has been some changes made to that project. And actually, I do have on here the La Jolla variance, so that if the council does accept our recommendation to bring it back to you, that would happen on July 7th. And then lastly, on July 7th, we have a rearranging of the officers of the Planning Commission.
Did it change anything?
Yes, they did. And that's why normally an appeal would go to the City Council as is. But because there are so many changes made to it, it is our recommendation it comes back to the Planning Commission. And the code actually says that.
Yeah, I thought we talked about last year that, this meeting around July 4th, this holiday week, should not occur. I mean, I thought we made that a kind of a policy. Look back in the minutes, but I'm almost positive about that.
In this case, July 4th is on a Monday.
Right.
And this is on Thursday.
Right.
So I guess,
the whole
at
week,
what point do you, you want the whole week
holiday
off?
Week.
It's really up to the Planning Commission if you want to reschedule that date.
I'm going to request this excused absence for that date anyway.
I will too.
Yeah, me too. I'm in Napa.
So should we move it to...
I don't think we should wait until the 21st because there's a couple things going on. I mean, there's these items. There's also the... what else is there?
Well, I was going to ask, why you've got the 150 Newport Center study session on June 23rd, and then right on July 21st, less than a month, you've got that coming before us. I mean, how does that give them enough time to react to comments? And I know, I don't want to slow them up in their process, but it's pretty stacked back to back. I mean, there's only one.
Yeah.
It certainly is, definitely. I mean, on June 23rd, if we hear a significant amount of comments that will require significant redesign, then the July 21st date obviously would be changed.
Yeah, I'd like to see it continued to August 4th.
Well, let's let Brenda manage that. But my immediate question is
July 7th.
Could we move it a week?
We can certainly change the date. It just depends on availability of the
Well, the 14th
chamber.
is my birthday, and it's not happening.
July 13th.
13th. What is it, a big one?
Yeah, you're going to get an invite, don't worry. Okay.
How about the 13th?
I don't know. I mean,
July-
this is a regular when we do this stuff, so, we're just trying to make sure that we're being we're not trying to slow things up.
We could have sent out an email surveying the 7 commissioners, since 2 of you aren't here tonight, and to see about different dates that are available. Because we also do need to look at the council chambers availability, as well as other meetings might be happening. So it's kind of best for us to look,
Okay.
see what are the dates available.
Well, why don't you
and
see
then
what other dates are available
Exactly.
the following week?
the following week.
Yeah, and then,
Yeah, because if we're doing we're skipping the number 1, and then number 3 is questionable, that variant, or the appeal of that variance?
I think that what might be the West Newport Mesa Streetscape Master Plan, that is most likely going to be punted to a different date. Village Inn is looking good. La Jolla, yes. So we have definitely 2 items.
That's based on the council's.
Right. It's assuming council agrees to send it back to you.
okay. Well, let's assume, Brenda, that July 7th won't be the meeting, and that there'll be a date the following week that works for the city and staff, and we'll see what works best for the commissioners.
Perfect. Thank you.
With the understanding that, that July 21 may not even happen either, so this may be the only. Where you're gone. Okay, but you won't miss something the following week. Okay. All right. Update on city council items. Wait, did you already do that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I do have one important thing to mention, though. On May 10th, the City Council did uphold the Planning Commission's approval of the Dunes use permit. They made a couple different changes to it to limit the number of level 1 events during the first year, because after that first year, it's going to come back to you to take a look at to see how they've been operating. So you'll be seeing that just as a review type of situation next May 2017. That's all I have.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone, for staying late and working through all this. So, meeting is adjourned.